Shut up, fool!
If it makes someone feel better, what about their feelings?
I don't give a shit about their feelings. I'm old.
I'm old, but I appeal to young people. I'm their role model. Live chat is on, not top chat. So I found this in my recommendations on YouTube. Steph Mercel? It's French, right? Mercel? Canadian, fellow Canadian. I'm Canadian and American. That's right. I'm doubly as good as most of you. And she gives, I don't know, how many arguments? Argument four? Four arguments why if you're born with a penis, you shouldn't compete against her. And I thought it was pretty good. And in fact, I said, hey, I'm going live soon to talk about this video. Well done, by the way. You're welcome to join me. Search Pinecreek Politics on YouTube. Let me know in the live stream chat if you're there. So if you're there, Steph, hop on. I'd rather talk to you than just watch your video. Not that the video is bad. It's actually quite good. Very good. And we'll also maybe talk about Peter Boghossian. He role plays as a woke person. A woke person, by the way, is someone in Peter's mind and mine. I played VR golf with him a couple weeks back, and I think he gave me the definition of woke. Or maybe it was the definition of social equity. I forget. But it had something to do with a big pile of doo-doo. So you know where he's coming from there. And then if we have time, we'll stop by Mythvision and see what they're talking about. The climate hasn't gotten any warmer in the last 6 years, and sea levels haven't gotten any higher. I checked, so we're okay there. So let's get started with this. Steph Mercel. Mercel?
In this video, I'm going to share with you my arguments for why transgender women should not compete against biological women in sports. Before we get into it, I want to make it clear that
Let me know if it's too loud, too soft. I think her video is very soft, so I'm using a booster right now. She's being boosted. It's not because she's a woman that she's being boosted. It's just her. She probably had some audio problems.
I believe in the freedom of expression, that all people should be able to express themselves however they so choose. If you want to identify as transgender, gender neutral, gay, polygamist, whatever, that is your right,
Atheist.
And I respect that. Where the line is crossed for me is when a biological man decides he is now a woman and is therefore entitled to the same rights, privileges, and opportunities as a biological woman.
Yeah, okay, my first advice, well done, good opening statement, but my first piece of advice, take it or leave it, is don't use the word rights. Try to avoid that word. Because it's so demanding, and it's so, I'm a very touchy-feely guy, and when I hear someone, I demand rights, it's like a very demanding, and I'm such a soft, gentle man that I just want it to be like opportunities and privileges. I mean, rights is so secluded to certain things found in the Constitution in the United States, at least. In Canada, I don't know what you Canadians think. People think they have rights when really they just have privileges or opportunities. Yeah, and rights, they're not an illusion, but they are, there's something, if you're an atheist like me, there's something solely given by other humans. So if 99.9% of humans say you don't have this right, guess what? You don't have it. Sucks, but it's true.
Mentally displaces biological women from accessing an even playing field of biological women against biological women. Specifically today, I want to talk about transgender women competing in women's sports. So, why do I care? Well, as a professional athlete myself, and as someone who has competed in sports since I was a young girl, I believe sports is one of the most beautiful and amazing things about our human existence.
I bet you she lives in Alberta because that's where all the great skiers in Canada are from. Maybe British Columbia. Alberta or British Columbia. By the way, Steph, if you ever see this, I'm from Manitoba originally, small rural town. But yeah, I look up to you if you can ski. I look up to anybody who can get down a hill on skis without breaking a leg.
Existence and experience. To me and for many others, sports has provided us with an opportunity for growth, personal development, to overcome obstacles, challenges, and struggles, equipping us with the tools to help us achieve our goals and be successful later in life. And that is being threatened. If transgender women who are biological males can compete alongside me, I'm giving up today because the playing field is no longer fair. Equality of opportunity is compromised and thus reduces my motivation to compete in sports.
Yeah, my advice is not to give up if this is allowed, but you and other women, real women, by the way, when I say real women, I mean biological women. That's what I mean by real. But instead of giving up, the real women should get together and protest in a way. I don't know how you would do it in skiing, but in track and field, if there's a biological man running against real women, when the gun goes off, real women don't move. And then wait till the biological man has crossed the finish line, then you guys run. That would be my suggestion. And sure, there'll be tears, but that's okay. We all got to cry a little sometimes.
I play to win, not to come second to biological men. As a female athlete, I'm motivated to train hard, to overcome obstacles, but I cannot out-train the natural biological advantages that men have. One reason why I want to start having this conversation now is that changing guidelines takes time. And next year, the Summer Olympics take place. And the IOC, or International Olympic Committee's current guidelines on transgender athletes is that they don't need to make any changes to compete against biological women.
Yeah, well, here in the US anyhow, sentiment is changing, and it's changing really fast. Where is it here? Sports, I think 2/3 of people think that, no, if you're born with a penis, stay out of female sports. Case closed. Yeah, here it is. This is fairly new, too. This is May of this year, Washington Post. Is it May of this year? Yeah, May of this year it came out. Most Americans say trans women and girls should not be allowed to compete in sports with other women and girls. 62% should not. In youth, high school, college, professional, it's pretty consistent across the board. This will become important later in Steph's arguments. Why do I got two of them up there? Where did I move one to the side? Sorry, Myron's on break right now, and so I have to do everything. I got no production guy.
Personally, I think that's unacceptable, and that transgender women should not be competing against biological women.
What is a biological woman? What a stupid question. There's many characteristics, many traits you can use, like chromosomes, like vagina, like ovaries, like uterus. And but what about these exceptions? Yeah, there's exceptions, and yes, there's intersex. But if you have to ask what is a biological woman, then I fear for humanity.
And in sports, period. So here are my arguments. A very high-level argument is that if it was truly the case that there is no difference between transgender women and biological women in terms of athletic performance, then it must also be true that there is no difference between transgender men and biological men in terms of performance. But this is obviously not the case because we see transgender women winning women's competitions, but we do not see transgender men winning men's competition.
Yeah, I think that's true. Why? You know, when I was talking to Peter Boghossian about a month ago, is it? Or 3 weeks ago, whenever it was, and we were talking about this issue a little bit, and he made the claim that a lot of people are not aware of just how better men are than women at sports, at anything physical. He thinks that people are sincerely ignorant about these facts. And I find that hard to believe. But let me just tell you, you don't have to even look this up yourself. You can trust me. I'm your source. That men are severely dominant over women in all sports. All sports. You hear that, Ray? He keeps telling me that women might be better than men in ultra-distance marathon running, and I don't believe him. But it's not even close. It's not even close how dominant men are. Get this through your thick skulls. And she brings this point up.
Not a single case. And an argument can be made. There's a higher proportion of transgender women who want to compete in sports. Okay, but why?
By the way, if you weren't listening and you missed her point was, you notice you don't see biological women becoming men, competing against men in professional sports or any type of sports and winning. But you do see it the other way around. That tells you something.
Is that the case? Because my argument would be, why would you want to compete when you're probably going to come in last? There's very little motivation for transgender men to compete against biological men because they know they're going to get absolutely crushed.
Yes.
It's dangerous.
Yes.
As a woman, I don't want to compete against biological.
A woman going into boxing, MMA fighting, could literally die. I mean, probably die. Can you imagine a, 240-pound woman identifies as a man back when Tyson was fighting and wants a shot, somehow gets a shot at Tyson. Tyson, one punch, done. Out. Gone. Kaput.
Biological men, and I don't want biological men competing against me because I think it's dangerous and unfair, period.
No, I'm saying it's not even, I would say it's not an exception, blasticful. I'm saying I'm making the claim there's not one sport that women can even come close to men. One could even say poker and chess, but I go too far.
This argument that women are just a testosterone number has been made many times, but clearly some sporting bodies and people don't understand, so I'll make it again. There are a number of sports where transgender women can compete against biological women as long as they suppress their testosterone levels for 12 months or some other marginal period of time. The testosterone levels they set for these transgender athletes, yes, on average is lower than those of biological men.
Mitesh, you make a good point. What's the obsession with sports? Yeah, what's the big deal? To me, this is actually more of a free speech issue, which we'll get into later, and just the way that society, some people within society, shuts down other voices like mine. Like, there's a lot of people who would not last 5 minutes watching this video because of hurt feelings, or just call me a bigot, or even Steph a bigot, a transphobe. And my advice to Steph and to other people is, let them call you these names. They're just names. They're just words. I know they can hurt once in a while, but accept the things you can't control. Know who you are. Be strong.
But still far higher, like 5 times higher than what's normal for biological women. So even a rule that is used to try and level the playing field On paper, comparing testosterone levels of biological women compared to transgender women is unfair. That's a fact. Now,
Yeah, I agree with her. Mark Bachman says professional sports are a waste of time. Mark Bachman, you were a chess nerd in high school. I'm sure of it, right? You played chess. You probably were pretty good. But no, professional sports are not a waste of time. Number one, they provide entertainment. Number two, they provide goal setting. When you see an athlete excel in their sport, it is inspiring. This is why a lot of people view sports almost like religions, with their teams, and they cheer and they face paint and they do all this, is because their team inspires them. It helps them get through their Monday mornings. They have something to talk about, something to argue about. It gives them hope, meaning, and purpose. It's one of the best forms of entertainment out there, especially because of this inspiration factor. Like when you see a professional athlete spend hours and hours on their craft, on their sport, it motivates you to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't have that chocolate donut. Maybe I should get off the couch. Maybe I can be a little bit better. Sure, I can't compete with them, but no, it's great.
Now, let's take this argument one step further. There are some biological women who take testosterone. I'm not saying it's true for all of them, but some bodybuilders do. And why do they take testosterone? To build muscle, increase their strength, reduce their body fat percentage.
Yes, right. What Steph is really saying here is the women who excel the most in women's sports tend to be men. I mean, well, she's saying that too with the trans issue, but are more like men. The more mannish you are as a woman, the more likely you are to win in your sport.
All things that enhance athletic performance. If a biological woman was found to have elevated levels of testosterone, we call that doping.
Yes.
Cheating. They would be banned. But for transgender women to have elevated levels of testosterone, that's somehow fair? If you're saying you're a woman, then you
if you dope, it's unfair, but if you have it naturally, then it's fair.
should abide by the same rules as a biological woman. And where this argument...
Sapir Odd makes a great point here. Who cares if they lose and cry? You're talking about the biological women, right? Why are you siding for the trans? See, this is where this is feel sorry forism. I feel sorry for more women than trans women because there's more of them. If you are especially if you're an atheist who believes in this reducing net suffering, then hey, if one or two trans women cry and it saves 20 biological women from crying, then you should let the trans people cry. Isn't that how the scales work?
just blows my mind.
Oh, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking, but Doug, they might kill themselves. We'll talk about that later.
Is that we're ignoring all the other performance-enhancing benefits that men have, including the benefits of having high testosterone levels prior to them transitioning.
By the way, I have the paperwork right over there. Right over there. I have too much testosterone in my blood. At least I used to. I've told this story before, but not to brag, but like I had more testosterone as a 40-year-old, 42-year-old, like 10 years ago, than most 18-year-olds. True story. Yep.
Which are basically all irreversible. Listen, a fully grown man who has gone through all the developmental stages of a man, including puberty, is just built different. Men have a higher proportion of fast-twitch muscle fibers, more muscle mass, strength and power, lower body fat percentages, larger bone structures and bone density, greater cardiac and respiratory function. Men are just bigger, stronger, faster, and that's life. And sometimes I hate to admit it, but my younger brother barely works out and he's stronger than me.
Well, yeah, no question. Look how big he is. This is your younger brother. He's huge. He looks like 6'4", 6'5", 220, 230. Yeah. He eats the chocolate donuts and he could probably bench press double what you can, maybe even triple.
And I train every single day. The point of this argument is that a fully grown man who's acquired all the performance-enhancing benefits of being a man then decides he is now a woman, takes testosterone suppressants for a very negligible period of time, then starts competing against biological women with the belief that it is fair and an equal playing field? No.
No.
And to be honest, it's incredibly degrading and disrespectful to all the women athletes.
Preach it.
Many of whom have worked their entire lives incredibly hard to earn their place in their sport. Next argument.
Yeah, and one thing that I think she left out here is that it's not just about winning, because you can have biological women with abnormal levels of testosterone, abnormal bone density, lung cavity volume, all that sort of thing. In other words, they're more mannish than womanish, but they're still biological women. You can still have that, and they'll probably win in their respective sports. But we're talking about it's not fair for a trans woman to come in 6th and a biological woman to come in 7th, because that might matter in going to the Olympics and sponsorships and whatever. It matters, these places. So it's not just about winning. It's about a man got one higher than me, and that means X. That means I get less money. I don't get to go to the Olympics. I don't get to compete at this meet.
There's a new ruling by World Aquatics, which is the International Federation for Competitive Water Sports, where their new inclusion policy states that biological men can compete against biological women only if they have not experienced any form of male puberty beyond 10 or stage 2.
By the way, when I said the Washington Post had that 65% of society in the United States is against biological men in women's sports, we have Leah Thomas to thank for that. This is one good thing that's come out of this. I would say that Leah Thomas has almost solely changed people's minds on this in the last 12 months. Maybe that's hyperbole, but I tell you, it has impacted. You see this 6'2", 6'4" man blowing women out of the water, literally. It's like, no, okay, that's enough. And even if you are a supporter of trans women in women's sports, you're at least a little more quiet now. You're not as boisterous as you used to be, right? Admit it.
The argument against this new rule is that even before puberty, there are differences in an athletic gap between boys and girls. This has been studied in preschool children, where boys have a better throwing velocity, throwing distance, and throwing accuracy compared to girls. Boys also have broader shoulders, longer forearms, and differences in the brain area associated with integrating motion detection, such as blocking.
By the way, Steph, I appreciate the work and effort you put into this. Like, just getting all these excerpts, or maybe you took it from someone else, but at least you did the work to find it. But yeah. Now I can just show this, give you the credit, Steph credit. Go check out her channel, Steph Marcel. The link's in the description.
Blocking something or throwing something. So even at a young age, boys have a fundamental athletic advantage over girls. Thus, the idea that as long as you circumvent puberty, all is fair and equal is just not true. The argument here is that biological men will always have an advantage over biological women, because the reality is some of these advantages are programmed into the DNA of biological men. So no matter what hormonal or anatomical changes a transgender woman makes, they will always have the athletic advantage of having a man's DNA.
Yeah, and if a biological man, is in the 77th percentile in their sport when they're competing against men, they're automatically going to jump up at least 10 percentage points, probably 20. If they're 77 percentile with men, they're probably going to be in the top 97 percentile women, if not winning everything.
And that's undeniable.
Biological women have periods.
Every month, biological women have a menstrual cycle, with symptoms I'm sure many of us are aware of, including mood swings, bloating, cramping, and fatigue.
Yeah. I was raised with 3 sisters. And I remember I was, 12 years old. My sister was 14. And our parents were gone, and I remember hearing my sister scream. I mean, a loud scream. I go running into her room, and she's lying on her bed, hanging on to her stomach and just writhing in pain. And that was the first time as a 12-year-old I realized just how of a pain menstrual cramps can be. And this happens to many, many women 12 times a year. If you don't think that has an impact on your daily life, whether it's sports or work or school or whatever, you be stupid with 2 O's.
In my case, I can definitely say my menstrual cycle has had a significant impact on my athletic performance. I lost my period for a number of years. When it came back, it was erratic, I had very heavy bleeding, and it was very painful. I found myself fatigued with very low energy levels, and I was diagnosed with iron deficiency anemia. It affected my training, my mental health, and my desire to train and compete.
Yeah, my wife had to have a hysterectomy because she bled too much. At what age was it? 40? Yeah, it's terrible. And going through the process of getting a hysterectomy is terrible too. Like, she was pretty out of it for a while.
I was very hesitant, but I started using an IUD birth control to try and alleviate some of these symptoms. After 3 years, yes, some of the pain and bleeding was reduced, but I also started to experience new symptoms. And so,
Pinecreek, what would you do if a trans male beat your son in sport? I'd say, good for you. I'm not sure why you asked that.
So in the end, I recently had it removed. It's an ongoing struggle for me, and I know of many women athletes with similar experiences. An opposing point I've heard to this argument is that if women just take birth control, we won't have periods, solving the period problem, leading to transgender women having no advantage. This opposing point infuriates me because it suggests that the burden is on women to subject themselves to hormonal intervention to accommodate men.
Woo. I love that. Great point.
Furthermore, although birth control has been helpful for many women, it is not symptom-free and can cause a lot of problems. Not to mention, not all birth control is the same, and finding the right one can take months, if not years. To conclude this point, a woman's menstrual cycle can significantly impact their ability to train and perform at their best. And although some birth control methods can alleviate certain symptoms, it's not foolproof and can come with many side effects. Furthermore, it should not be the woman's responsibility to make changes to her body and biology to accommodate transgender women in efforts of fairness and equality.
Well said.
This last argument is not often mentioned because it's not comparing the competitive advantages of a transgender woman versus a biological woman, but rather differences in the biological considerations of being a woman athlete versus a transgender woman athlete. The biggest one, in my opinion, and the one I want to focus on, is women's desires to have children and start a family. Now, I'm not saying this is the case for all women, but there comes a time...
But I would say it's the case for most women, whether you women like to hear it or not, whether you men, you liberal men like to hear it, you leftist woke men like to hear it or not. Steph, if you don't know me, I'm one of those evil atheists who's a naturalist. And I think we've been programmed, women have been programmed to have this desire to reproduce. Now, there's always exceptions.
Many women's lives when they need
men too. Men have the same programming.
The difficult decision between continuing their professional careers and starting a family. This is especially true for women athletes because it becomes dangerous for them to continue training at the same...
Stephanie asks, I don't understand why more men don't empathize to women athletes dealing with this trans... I think you're wrong. I think a lot of men sympathize with women here, biological women. When I say, the fact you even have to put these adjectives in front of women and men seems stupid to me. But we have to do it nowadays. But I do think, even though men can be very sympathetic to this issue, I think it's up to women, when it comes to women's sports, to put their foot down and say, we don't care if the trans women cry. Enough's enough. You almost have to be that forceful with it. We don't care if they're hurt. You almost have to be that forceful with it. And then, when enough people start saying that, then it's done. And I think we're already over the hill. I think Canada's a little bit behind, because Canada's so lovey-dovey, touchy-feely.
Same level in competing while pregnant. And yes, some women do make a comeback after having children, but that's a very small minority. As a tangent to this point, I think the biological reality of women's role in starting a family is a big reason why men have longer and more profitable athletic careers than women.
Yes, I agree. And I think I'll let her explain it, not me. But this applies not only to sports, but in careers, jobs, workplace. This is why there's a pay gap. Because it's harder for women to work when they're like 9 months pregnant, and then breastfeeding, and then, no sleep. Having kids is a lot of work for men too, but especially for women. They can't even walk sometimes for a week after having a normal birthing. Having a family is a big deal for a woman. And then you add the periods 12 months a year to that mix. It's tough being a woman. This is why the Jews in the Torah viewed women as being cursed by God. This is why they probably blamed Eve for taking of the apple, right? Or the fruit.
Is the tail end of most athletes' careers is when they make the most money. For example, the Forbes list of the 10 highest paid athletes 2023, all are men, most at the end of their careers with children. Staying in the game now is more of a victory lap and payday than about winning trophies and championships. Of course, the main reason in pay discrepancy is the difference in viewership discrepancy, and the fact that men are just bigger, stronger, faster than women, and makes for better entertainment.
Yes. Men make for better entertainment when it comes to sports because they're bigger, stronger, faster. I agree 100%. And for women to, I think, this is an aside, but for women to demand the same type of pay, the same type of viewership, whatever, for being slower, weaker, that's just silliness. And I bet you Steph would agree with me if she were here, and she would say, I understand that, women should be paid as much as men when it comes to sports, because people don't really watch women's sports as much as men's sports. It's not even close. And let me say even something more controversial, but I think it's the truth. When men do watch women's sports, it's usually because they're pretty, they're good looking. Not always. But like I said earlier, I'm a naturalist. We've evolved this way. Procreation. We see a beautiful woman with showing her bare legs, muscular legs, whatever. This is why men watch gymnastics and figure skating. You think they really care about gymnastics and figure skating? Probably not. This is why they watch track and field, long jump, pole vaulting. Let's tell the truth here. Let's be honest with each other. It's not fair, but the truth is, if you are not a good-looking woman, you have to be even better at sports in order to get the sponsorships and all that stuff. If you're a really good-looking woman, and you come in 7th place, 8th place, or whatever, you'll probably get more sponsorship than the ugly woman who wins.
Which basically confirms the reality that women's sports and athletes are different than men's sports and athletes. The point of this argument is that biological women athletes face a very difficult decision. often at the peak of their professional careers, to either continue pursuing their athletic dream or
Glenn Royer, yes, in a way, yes. It might actually increase the entertainment value having trans women in women's sports. But that's not the issue here. The issue that Steph's bringing up is one of fairness.
Start a family and retire. This is just not something transgender women athletes will ever have to consider.
Jacob Smith, Pinecreek is saying the quiet part out loud. Yeah, I am. I'm telling the truth with a capital F.
What has taken biological women decades, if not centuries, to find a place for themselves in competitive sports is now being threatened in a matter of months. Just to take a step back for a second, the first Olympics of the modern era took place in 1896 and were not open to women. And even once women were given the opportunity to compete, it was only in a few select sports.
I would like to remind women who gave women the opportunity to compete in sports. Men. Just a little reminder.
Concerns over women's strength and stamina and more physically strong.
See, that comment sounds sexist, but it's proving a point. This shows the superiority of men over women biologically, physically. If women were bigger, stronger, faster than men, it would have been women allowing men to come to the Olympics. Right? The truth hurts.
Sports. At the time, the founder of the International Olympic Committee described women's sports as impractical, uninteresting, unaesthetic, and we are not afraid to add, incorrect. Maybe the trans community feels the same way now about not feeling accepted, and I can understand that. However, the pursuit of trying to accommodate trans athletes in sports cannot be made at the expense of women's advancements, hard work, opportunities, and place in sports. Currently, Alpine Canada does not have clear guidelines or rules about trans athletes in sports. As a Canadian alpine ski racer, I've not been in a position where I've had to compete against a transgender athlete. But I want to advocate that biological women should only ever compete against biological women.
Amen.
I know I'm not the only one that feels this way. Many biological women athletes feel silenced, like they can't talk due to the politics of their sport.
Okay, I got some advice here. And Steph, you can spread this behind closed doors to your biological women friends, athletes. Take a stand and you will be rewarded in the public realm. The attitude in the public has already shifted. I think even in Canada, I bet you it's way over 50% agree with you, Steph. If you were to, well, you've already taken the first step. You've gone public here. I know you have a small channel, but you've made yourself known. But if you have friends who are getting first place in various sports, like the top of the top, encourage them. Don't be scared of losing sponsorships. I have a feeling that over the next 5 years, the reverse is going to happen. The people who will take a stand, not be scared, will be rewarded. And there's always going to be those people who are going to call you transphobic, bigoted, terrible people. Let them. Just let them. Just like water going off a duck's back. You'll be fine.
Fear of being dropped by donors and sponsors, being sanctioned by their sporting organizing body, or being threatened on social media. Women athletes should not be silenced. Sports is our love, our passion, our dream, and nobody should be able to take that away from us. It will be a sad day when all the top women athletes are biological men. In closing, as I mentioned earlier, I love sports. And I wish everyone, no matter your gender, can experience the gift of sports. But it has to be fair and equal.
Yes, Mason Dry, I can argue the other side. In fact, that's when we talk about Peter Boghossian, we're going to talk about that. So thank you for bringing that up. It's always good to be able to steel man the other side. And I will do that.
I am not saying transgender athletes cannot play sports, but maybe we need another category, like an open category, which I know has been discussed and definitely something I think is worth exploring. But the reason I am making this video and will continue to make these videos is because I want to preserve fair, equal, and just competition in women's sports.
My advice here, Steph, is leave the word equal out, because even among women, biological women, you guys are not equal. What do I mean by that? There are freaks of nature. There are women out there who are truly biological women who are freaks of nature. Venus Williams is an example. Now, Venus Williams, even as a freak of nature, as a woman, is nowhere close, not even close to a man, an average man in professional tennis. But even, don't use the word equal, because even among women, you guys are not equal. Men, definitely not equal. Human beings are not born equal. Some humans are born without legs. Definitely not equal when it comes to sports.
Or every girl with the ambition to play.
Ezra says, do you think this talking lady is listening to you? Yeah, I think she will eventually hear this. In fact, if you do hear this, let me know. You don't have to let me know publicly if you don't want to, but email me.
Sports and keep the dream alive. Because I know it's the right thing to do. And because I know I have science on my side. And I hope you are on my side and will join me in this fight.
I am on your side. I will join you. I have been joining you for probably years now. At least a year. But getting back to, is she listening to me? I commented on her video. She seems very responsive to every comment. She will eventually see this. She will see my comment. She will find this video. And she will smile and say, hey, this Pinecreek guy's, he's all right. He's all right. I don't agree with everything he says, but he's all right. Do I steel man this now, or okay? If you want to get to the guts of the steel man argument, is you need to allow transgender women to compete in women's sports, because if you don't, they're going to commit suicide. Let's cut to the chase. Okay, let's not talk about testosterone levels for a year or so. Let's get to the bare bones. What's really at stake here? Steph, I'm steel manning the other side. If you really cared about trans people, this should be your primary concern. We got lives at stake. We got real suffering here. Trans people suffer like nobody else suffers. Can you imagine the dysphoria? And you want to take away the one thing that might give them joy? That's not fair, says the steel-manned Pinecreek. Then we can talk about all the minor issues, like about yeah, if you are taking hormonal suppressants to the level of women, then what's the problem? Oh, sure, you're talking about bone density and lung capacity and all these things. But in essence, many governing bodies have found that with many sports, that this will suffice. So how's that? How am I doing with the steel manning? But now I'll steel man something else a little later. But my opinion is to keep things really, really simple. If you're born with a penis and you're not intersex, those are so rare, and there are the exceptions. But if you're born with a penis, you can't go in women's sports. No exceptions. That's it. And sure, some trans people are going to cry. Let them cry. Take my money, bigot. Thank you, Big Daddy Addy. I love that. This is the attitude you need. Be called a bigot and laugh. I mean, that infuriates the woke people, that when they call you the worst things possible and you just laugh at them. They don't know what to do. Well, actually, it can lead to violence. They get so emotional. Some of them get so emotional that you're not affected the way you should be affected by them calling you names. That they go, okay, we'll pick up a bat. And this is why I got security. This is why I've hired Nathan as my bodyguard. This is why I have a German Shepherd dog named Adolf. I mean, I am good to go. This is why I live in a gated community. I can say these things without fear of repercussions. Okay, here's Peter Boghossian talking to several people. This guy is known for wearing a big billboard on his chest and going out in university campuses. I would say for the purpose of generating discussion, but a critic could say just to trigger people. Either way, I have no problem with it. And he's going to steelman. He's going to be a woke person. Again, a woke person is defined as a particular type of follower of critical race theory and all types of critical theories, who suffers from a mental disorder called feel sorry forism. This is how I perceive Peter Boghossian views woke people. Yeah, let's see if this is the right time.
Worst of the worst. So maybe there's no hope in
No, we come
Portland.
to the right place.
Yeah, maybe there's no hope here, but I think Portland, Oregon does not represent the majority of the United States.
Let me, if I may, I'd like to try an experiment, if it's cool with you guys. I would like to role play a woke person.
Oh no.
Let's do it.
I did that with Heather McDonald. So let's try this. So I'm just going to throw this out to everybody.
By the way, if someone thinks I'm strawmanning the wokes, or if Peter's strawmanning the wokes, you can always come in. I'll open the room later. You can always come in and do a better job.
And I'm going to do violence in the police and everything. So, do you deny that some children suffer from genuine gender dysmorphia? Dysphoria.
No, gender dysphoria is real. It exists. Now, historically, this affected 1 out of tens of thousands.
60,000, 0.06.
Yeah, it depends on the time you're looking at. But it affected boys a lot more than girls as well, like 2 to 1. And if you look at all the studies into gender dysphoria, more than 80% of these kids with severe gender dysphoria from a young age, when they went through puberty, they just grew out of it.
Whoa. They just grew out of it? Are you saying this is just a phase? So he made a few claims here that it was like 1 in, what did he say, 50,000 historically? And it affected biological boys, males, 2 to 1 over females. These are falsifiable claims, which I haven't checked, but maybe someone here can check. Is that true? Historically, this dysphoria, 2 to 1 males, 1 in 50,000. Did he say 50,000? Something like that.
Well,
and if you look at the most recent study, it followed 139 boys from when they were 5 all the way to the 20s.
I know the study.
87.8% of them grew out of it. 63.6% grew up to be gay.
Oh.
So what you're doing, Mr. Woke, when you're advocating for these drugs for kids, is you're harming kids who would grow up to be gay.
Whoa. This is why there's tension, I think, in the gay community, if there's such a thing, and the trans community, if there's such a thing, because they're not all monolith, of course. They don't all think the same. But if these statistics are correct, you can understand why homosexuals would not like trans people. Because by being transitioning, you're saying, you're denying your gayhood. You're not being who you really are. You're just a gay person. Get over it, they would say.
Well, okay, so I'm going to come back to that issue. I'm not going to skirt it. Let's talk about the kids who are actually suffering from this condition. And all of you Nazis here want to, want to...
You're much too...
Remember, he's role-playing as a woke person. That's why he called them Nazis. The thing is, what is funny to me is most people who call other people Nazis and fascists and bigots and transphobes or whatever, they really think that they're accomplishing something. And I think in some cases they are, but I mean, you know the stereotypical right winger, right? They're dead inside. Well, that's me. You're not really doing anything. This is why people hate Trump so much, because you could call him anything in the book and he's not going to care. It's not going to make a dent. Unless you say he's a bad businessman or that he's not really rich. That affected him.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm still civil, right? I'm not yelling or punching anybody.
I know you have to call for us to die.
Yes,
You really
yes,
want to
yes,
play
yes.
the part.
Yeah.
So what about those kids who don't get actual gender affirming care? The 0.06% of the kids who suffer from this.
I think we refer back to that study of what happens when you put a child on puberty blockers. Then later on in life, let's say, okay, this child doesn't get their gender affirming care, but at that point, when they reach 18 years of age, then they have the full genitalia to get that transition surgery if they so decide.
But isn't that too late, because puberty hasn't been blocked yet? So they wouldn't. A male would still develop, like Leah Thomas would still develop those qualities and physical characteristics.
So are you saying that even though 80 to 90% of the kids would grow out of it, that we should just sterilize all of them?
Well, I'm saying that to be a sovereign individual and have control over your own body autonomy, if a 15-year-old wants to be castrated, who are we to tell them that's not the case?
Well, why are we allowed to tell 15-year-olds not to drink alcohol or not to have sex with grown adults then? I think that at 15, well, one, your brain isn't fully developed.
Or get tattoos or own guns?
Yeah,
Or go in the
exactly. It's
military?
like if that then becomes a slippery slope where it's like, okay, so are we now going to start allowing children to make decisions for other very adult things?
Additionally, these kids today, most of them don't have gender dysphoria.
You're talking about the contagion.
That's right.
But let me try to answer her question,
Sure.
if I may, please. So I'm going to give you what you're looking for my argument to remain consistent. I think we should lower the age of tattoos, gun owning, drinking, everything to 15. That way we'll be consistent.
Why would you stop at 50?
Billboard Chris. That's an excellent response. Why stop at 15? Why not go all the way down to 8? Let's let kids drive, drink, get tattoos at age 8.
Or a pedophile.
Why stop at 15? Why do you have any age of consent at all?
Well, would you be willing to compromise on your position, if we allowed kids to transition at 15?
No.
Would anybody?
As a Christian woman, I think that God created everybody as he intended. And again, too, this is something that I've thought about a lot as well, because I would say, like, I am more libertarian. So I'm like, okay.
See, I'm not, but that's a bad argument she's making. As a Christian woman, I think God created people as they intended. You can't say that. I don't know is her name Savannah? Because a woke person, a dirty woke atheist person could say, oh, so a child born without skin is the way God intended? So a child born without legs is the way God intended? I mean, that just falls flat very quickly.
Okay, live and let live. But when it comes to children, completely different story. And, in Texas, they were even trying to bump the age up for transition surgery to 25 when the brain is fully developed. I don't know if I completely agree with that, because I'm like, okay, 18, I feel like as a society, fine, you're 18 years old, you're an adult.
You do everything else at 18.
Yeah, it's like,
except drink, actually. So maybe, yeah.
There's no evidence. There's no evidence that this helps even the 18-year-olds.
Yeah, but there you go again. Why would we formulate our beliefs on the basis of evidence? Why not?
Yeah. I got to stop it here. The Billboard Chris guy, the bald guy, said there's no evidence that transitioning helps these kids. There's a lot of woke, in quotes, people who will disagree with that. It does help. Now, I would say that the metric for help, it has so many variables in it, like help over what period of time? Help with what exactly? Levels of depression? How do you gauge that, if it's gotten better or worse? Through self-reporting? And don't we have evidence of self-reporting that after transitioning, many transition people still suffer from depression or dysphoria even?
not just formulate the beliefs and the unequivocal personal testimonies, the lived experience of these. Well, that's what they'd say, right?
Yeah, they would.
I think so. I mean, well, they
never-
wouldn't have the
They can never
conversation at all.
fashion they can never fashion an argument that intelligent. But
But
we're ignoring the part. I mean, it is an important part that most of these kids don't have gender dysphoria, not even as it's defined in the DSM-5, because it never started with childhood onset.
Okay.
This is a craze that they're caught up in. But all of these kids have some mental health comorbidities going on.
Right.
We're not treating them for those. If you read Jamie Reed's report, they're sending kids straight from the psychiatric unit of the hospital. There was a boy who was sexually abusing dogs. They sent him to the gender clinic and they gave him Lupron. First appointment.
Lupron, isn't that the drug of choice for Dr. House on that House MD show? Always Lupron.
But even with the 18 and 19-year-olds, so yes, you could say adults can do whatever they want with their bodies. That doesn't mean doctors are just order takers. Doctors have sworn an oath to first do no harm, and you never go straight to the most invasive procedure. They should be screening for trauma and abuse, which is very common. And they should be treating these other underlying mental health comorbidities first. But instead, they're just order takers.
so you
Why is that? If it does happen, and I'm sure it does once in a while, why is it happening? And I think it's because of the fear of some type of societal repercussion that a trans person or their parents will complain, oh, this doctor doesn't believe my child's testimony, their lived experience, and refuses to, I don't know, oh, this doctor is now a bigot, a transphobe. Let's get his medical license pulled. Maybe that's the fear. I don't know.
You are saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to understand the argument. So you two are saying, and you haven't said anything, although you've laughed at the points I've made, but in my sincere attempt to model what a woke person would say, do you mean to tell me that you think that some types of lives are better to lead than others?
Yes, 100%. It's better not to be a lifetime pharmaceutical patient. It's better not to be in pain for the rest of your life. It's better to not be sterilized.
Well, then I think too a big portion.
It's just it's an eminently reasonable position, but I'm going to attack it anyway. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think one of my major issues with this too is that a lot of the kids, a lot of the young adults that are being targeted with this are not fully informed on the decisions that they're making. They don't know the long term. They don't know that they could potentially be sterilized. What do we hear consistently? Puberty blockers can be reversed.
Which is not true.
Transition can be reversed.
Okay, so
there's only two arguments from the woke. I'll tell you what they are.
Okay.
Literally.
Okay.
Kids will kill themselves if you don't let them transition.
Right.
And puberty blockers are reversed.
Okay, so
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. That's the main argument with trans sports as well. It's like, if you don't allow this, there could be lives on the line. But, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard me say this, there's no actual evidence. We don't know the actual suicide rates of trans people. We don't. Of actual deaths in the United States. If you don't believe me, try to look it up. Try to say, I found it, Doug, you're wrong. But please, listen to the words coming out of my mouth. Actual suicides. Not suicide ideation. Not suicide attempts. Not suicidal thoughts. Actual suicides. And it turns out, I think, that trans teenagers are really bad and that's a good thing. It's a good thing that they're bad at this, but they're really bad at actually committing suicide. If you want to know who's good at committing suicide, it's middle-aged white men. They know how to commit suicide. Teenagers, not so much.
Let's take on the second one, if I may.
All right.
Would you be willing to change your position if the children were informed honestly that this is irreversible?
So, no, of course not. The consent forms themselves state we don't know the long-term impacts, not only of the puberty blockers, but of the cross-sex hormones.
So they
that
are
they're getting.
informed.
Well, it states right on the consent forms that they sign that we don't have the information long-term. So if we don't even have the information, how can they give informed consent? It's impossible.
Also,
But
too,
we're asking children who still
Great question by Superior Odd. If we did know the suicide rates, see how influential I am? Superior Odd is actually even starting to talk like me. If we knew the suicide rates are high, would that change your view? I think it would. But it would make it more of a serious issue for me personally. But then the question is, what do you do about it? Like, it would change my mind in one sense, but in another sense, you don't. It's a form of terrorism, right? Do what I want, and let's say want means I want to be in trans sports. I want to be in sports as a trans woman, or I want to transition as a 15-year-old boy, whatever it is. You either do what I ask, or I'm going to kill myself. And let's say, Superior Odd, in your hypothetical, they actually will. And we got hardcore data that this happens like 60, 70, 80% of the time. That when a trans person threatens suicide or suicide thoughts, or whatever, ideation, that they actually do it. How do you respond to that? Because it's a sort of like a form of terrorism, right? You either do what we want, or somebody dies. I'll kill myself. I would say that in that case, they be, if you really care about their life, you put them in an institution. You put them in a room that they can't hurt themselves. If it got that high. If the suicide rate of actual suicides was that high, and if you really care about their lives, you'd put them in a padded room. Because that will keep them alive.
believe in magical thinking, that a big red fat man flies across the sky and drops presents under their tree. We expect them to be able to make these.
Yes, Glenn, I've seen the exact same one from India. Where are you, Glenn? I know exactly the one you're talking about. That's the only one I could find. I also found one of the UK, but I didn't trust the one from India. The UK one I trust a little bit more. That's racist, Doug.
Decisions about permanent fertility, about not being able to have a family, reducing your dating pool to zero, never having intimacy, never going to be able to have an orgasm. We expect a 10-year-old boy to be able to make a decision that he can never have an orgasm. We've got Marcy Bowers, who's a man who
I never knew that. So if you're a boy, if you're born a biological boy, man, you transition, you'll never have an orgasm? Is that true?
as a woman. He's the president of WPATH,
Yeah, that's Reed in the background. He was eating pizza earlier.
the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. They write what are called the standards of care that these children's hospitals can follow. He's on camera. I can show it to you, admitting that none of the boys who started on puberty blockers at Tanner stage 2, which is like 10, 11 years old, none of them, literally zero as adults, have ever had an orgasm.
An observation that I had that every single child who was, or adolescent who was truly blocked at Tanner stage 2 has never experienced orgasm.
Oh, not surgery, but hormone blockers. Hormone blockers prevent orgasms. That makes sense. Boy, that would suck. Like, who doesn't like a good orgasm once in a while? Right, man, bear, pig?
I mean, it's really about zero. These are of course, these are just assigned male at birth, so trans feminine, and it's because they never in their lives are exposed to testosterone.
Jazz Jennings, who society celebrated his transition on TV, which is disgusting. He's never had an orgasm. He's in his 20s now. He gained 100 pounds. He's like 300 pounds, so he's got that going for him now.
One of the sad thing about the Jazz story too is that, because I just went down this whole Jazz rabbit hole, and
I just watched. I didn't know who this Jazz person was, so I yesterday went on YouTube and And then I found Tim Pool's video on Jazz, and I mean, it's so scary, so sad, about his mother threatening to put a dildo in his constructed vagina so it doesn't close up. I mean, it's just horrendous.
He's like super, super upset and depressed, and his parents and all of society keep telling him, as soon as you transition, hopefully the depression will go away. His mom was like, oh, I hope that the depression is going to be gone. He transitions, he's more depressed and has more anxiety afterward. And again, it's just a lot of these kids are sold this lie that the surgery is going to be a quick fix to their depression, when again, it ties more into mental issues at that point.
Yeah, sold a lie that transitioning will be a quick fix. Maybe for some it is, but definitely for some it isn't. I'm just going to be blunt. Doug's skepticism about suicide ideation. I said actual suicides, not suicide ideation. I'm not denying that people can think about suicide. What I'm denying is that we actually know how many trans people in the United States actually commit suicide for being trans, not for other reasons like I happen to be trans, but I'm also addicted to heroin, or I happen to be trans and I also happen to be in the sex industry. I mean, I happen to be trans, but I also happen to be autistic and severely depressed. Not because of trans, I'm just depressed. I would be depressed if I wasn't trans. You know, that sort of thing. These other types of mental health conditions. Like, how do you parse that out? That they commit suicide because they didn't get the transitioning care they wanted or whatever, and not something else. But again, we do not have the data on this. We do not have hard data on this. I've talked to many, and well, I'll just say in quotes, woke people who I would even say are my friends, liberal, left-leaning friends, both on YouTube and via private email and whatever, asking them to provide me hard evidence of actual deaths, and they cannot do it. It is not there. I don't know why it's not there, because I admit there's probably some trans people who actually commit suicide, but why don't we have that data?
2, 3, 4 weeks ago, Jazz is on camera crying because he still doesn't feel right inside.
And his mom was like, don't say that, you're going to scare people. Or I think that was actually about his transition surgery, and he was like, oh, the stitches came undone and everything came undone. And his mom was like, don't say that, you're going to scare people.
Well, there's that. He had to have 2 more surgeries. But now he's mentally saying, you know, he still doesn't feel right.
Maybe it's
because
not...
they affirmed a mental illness. They affirmed a delusion. And when you affirm a delusion...
Yeah, I used to have a friend on Blab who was a psychologist of some sort. I forget exactly what level, how high up. But she said that when it comes to mental illnesses, like schizophrenia and other mental illnesses, you never play into the delusion. You never go along with it. So now, dysphoria is thinking you're a man when you're a woman, or vice versa. Now, if you define man and woman as this biological thing, that is clearly delusional, right? If you define it biologically. I don't think people would argue against that. They just don't define man and woman biologically. They define it some different way. So I think even a lot of trans people would admit that, yeah, if you were born a biological man, a male, and you think you're a biological female, that is delusional. And you should not play into that.
And in a 4-year-old, which is what he was, Well, it continues on.
Now you're making it hard for me to argue against that at 4. Okay, so that's particularly difficult.
Okay, but see, the way you argue against us at this point is by just saying you're a fascist, you're a Nazi.
No, but I'm trying to steelman it. I really am trying to steelman.
I do that too.
So
I ask people questions.
yeah, let me tell you why I think that's so important. I think it's incumbent upon rational, sane people to make an.
I agree, Brojo. And sorry to cut you off, Peter. We don't have the data, perhaps, because it will hurt the industry. I actually think there's something to that. I think if it were true that in the year 2022, a total of 31 trans people commit suicide out of, I don't know, what do they say, 1% of the population is trans? I mean, would there be such a concern? Like, it's tragic that 31 commit suicide, but I mean, it's even more tragic if it's 3,100, right?
Better than people who don't
Right.
have either the argumentative capacities or, to be very blunt with you, have been damaged by the educational system
Sure.
so that they're not capable of it.
Gabriella says it isn't delusional. No, if you say you are a biological man when you were born a biological woman, I would say that's the definition of delusion. That's, to me, that's the same thing as saying, or it's close to saying, looking at a German Shepherd and saying it is a goldfish. That's probably hyperbole because one's a mammal, one's not.
Their cognitive faculties have atrophied.
So if I were to steelman your argument,
Yeah.
okay, so puberty blockers you think are important because if we don't stop your physical development, then you're going to appear more like your sex, which is going to make it harder for you to pass as the opposite sex later. That's the whole reason for these puberty blockers, because otherwise you're not going to pass
Yeah.
as well.
That's one of them. And I think that the other one is the mental health of the individual.
Sure. Well, the other one is that if we don't transition you and start you on this process, that because you're not passing and because you're born in the wrong body,
Right.
then you're going to be suicidal and have worse mental.
Yeah. Well, okay. We can do away with that because that's just a lie.
But this is all they say, literally.
Yeah, I'm curious to know why Peter Boghossian, as he's steel manning a woke person, why he would say that. They wouldn't say that's a lie. They would say that's the truth. Right?
It's literally all they have. Suicide is every single time the first thing that comes out of their mouth, and puberty blockers are reversible, which they're not. That's a sales pitch. Now, sure. Now, when I'm talking to them, I always try to find a source of agreement. So they say puberty blockers are reversible. I'm not just going to go, no, they're not. I say, well, sure, if they went on puberty blockers for 3 months or so and came off, not too much harm done. Puberty would
Is
resume.
that really true?
Well, sure, puberty would resume. So what
But
this...
there's no harm. I mean, I'm not a medical
Well, there's
professional.
going to be 3 months of no puberty, but no, you'll be fine. I mean, it's not
'Cause
ideal.
Oh, Blasticful. I see what you mean now. You are skeptical of suicide ideation as a criteria for increased risk of suicide. That's your whole reason for not considering that literature. Stop ignoring this research. No, I'm not ignoring that research. I've read a lot of it. But here's my point to this. And I was thinking the other day when I was lying in bed on my pillow about this, is surely if you can decrease the risk of suicide ideation, you will lower the risk of suicide. This is what you're saying, right, Blasticful? I understand what you're saying. I'm not stupid. But this is how I look at it. It's like going out in a thunderstorm and saying if you hold up a metal rod, you're going to get struck by lightning. Well, yes, that increases your risk of getting struck by lightning. But even that is rare. Getting struck by lightning, no matter what, is rare. And I want to know how many actual suicides are there. So this is what would convince a guy like me that puberty blockers, surgery, bottom-up down surgery is effective at helping people not commit suicide, helping trans people not commit suicide. You get, 1,000 trans people before transitioning. Out of 1,000 people, or 10,000 is even better, how many of them actually committed suicide before transitioning? How many? 1, 2, 3, 5, 10? Get that number, a real number. That they died because related to them being trans. They died because of the anger, the disappointment, the depression of the dysphoria, whatever. Then transition 1,000 people, 10,000 people, and then track them over 5, 10, whatever number of years. Did they commit suicide? If so, how many? 1, 5, 10, 20. Then compare the two numbers, the two rates, if they're different sizes that you started with. Then you have real data. And I will guarantee this to you, flag-waving, phony, woke people out there, that it's not out there. That data is not out there. This is my guess is what's happening. When you hear, sorry, I gotta move the live stream chat. When you hear it lowers the risk of suicide, what you're really hearing is, I think, anecdotal data of psychologists saying the trans people are a little bit happier now. Well, if they're a little happier, then that means they're not going to commit suicide. It lowers the risk of suicide. I think it's that qualitative, that nebulous, that we don't have hard data, that it's just like, to me, it's almost like a throwaway thing. Of course, if you want ice cream and you get ice cream, why would you be sad? They're getting what they want. It has to lower the risk, right? You're welcome. Blam-tasticaful.
Was under the, and I am not, that's why I never talk about COVID or anything medical. No one should listen to me about medical stuff. Zero.
Yeah.
I was under the impression that the body has a natural homeostasis. And for example, when you go on testosterone, the body then manufactures less testosterone.
Right.
And so you more, that's why people who use steroids, bodybuilders, et cetera, they need to keep taking testosterone.
Right, because
So if
their
you
own
do
body
it-
stops making it.
Correct.
So
Isn't
what
that-
this drug does, the
Yeah.
technical term for this drug, these are gonadotropin releasing hormone agonists or analogs. They're
Okay.
the same thing. They stop the pituitary gland from releasing.
No, I'm not. Well, I'm against transitioning for minors for sure. I don't think. But if people wanted if I was a dictator of the world and could control the world with my very words, I would say I would still be more of a freedom type guy. Just don't do what I say, of course, because I'm a dictator. I would say it's best to not transition until you're age 28. Because they said, even in this one, age 25, we know through science that your brain keeps developing, more neurons are forming, and your brain starts the process of decay later than the rest of your body. Around age 28, it's fully developed. 25 to 28, it's fully developed. So I would recommend, if you're a trans person listening now, and I know we've got one person who's trans in here right now, I would say wait till you're 28 before you do anything surgical. And at how old, you said you're 22? Even the hormone stuff I would stay away from. Wait till 28, and if you still feel the same way, I would say go ahead. It's your body. But for kids, I mean, this is utterly stupid. I mean, kids are so confused. Teenagers are so confused about so many things. They're so influenced by peer pressure. They see attention that people get. They see, oh, the support and the love and the hugs and the kisses we have to support. I mean, you definitely don't want to screw up teenagers on things like that could potentially be irreversible, and some things are definitely irreversible. And there's no guarantee. We don't even have good data on, or good metrics on how you even categorize or measure how effective the transitioning was. Like, what if transitioning helped 5%, 10%? Is it worth it? What about 90%. Okay, then it's definitely worth it. But like, how much does it actually help compared to the risks and what it could hurt? What metrics are we even using for the risk reward benefit here?
Luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone.
Okay.
These in turn trigger the testes to produce testosterone or the ovaries to release estrogen.
Okay.
So they
the evidence of negative effects of surgery is way more anecdotal. And well, let's get the data before we do anything, right? Like, is the default position go ahead and then have the data come in over the next few decades? Or is the default position caution, don't just status quo, and then when people get older, then do the transitioning and then look at the data? Like, do we, with our kids, do we just, let's take the chance? And the reason why I think a lot of people on the left, a lot of the woke people are willing to take this chance is because they're scared that they're gonna die, they're gonna commit suicide. And that gets us back to the other problem. We don't even have data on that. What we have data on is someone's sad, they transition, they feel better for a time. Whoop-de-doo. I know that sounds harsh, but whoop-de-doo.
Given this drug actually has FDA approval for a condition called precocious puberty, which is where a girl younger than 8 or a boy younger than 9 is going into puberty.
Oh, wow.
So if your 6-year-old's got some rare condition, they would give this drug maybe for a year or two, and then take them off so that normal puberty could resume. Now, it does take a while for the endocrine system to kick back into gear.
Okay.
None of this is ideal. I don't even agree with that.
Okay,
I think
but
you're
there's
playing
no
God with children's
permanent
bodies.
damage at 3 months.
No.
Okay, all right.
It's not ideal, but
So
in practice, what happens though is these kids who start on puberty blockers, they're already sold on the whole process. Psychologically, they bought into puberty
Probably their
blockers,
parents too.
cross-sex hormones, and surgeries. We know statistically from a few different gender clinics, 98% of kids who start on puberty blockers go on to the cross-sex hormones. Together, these are sterilizing kids, sending teenage girls into menopause. Now, if you left these kids alone, well, guess what? They'd grow up, and they'd grow out of it.
They'd grow out of it. Now, this will infuriate a lot of people. But what he should say is the statistic he had before, and I don't even know if that statistic was true, but that 83% grow out of it? But 83%, if true, is still a big number.
Do some therapy. But the left has...
Yeah, but you can't do therapy because all the therapists are woke.
Well, sure.
They'll affirm their gender, so therapy is out.
But this...
Not all therapists are woke, of course. Remember, I think... well, I don't know if Peter's still steel-manning or pretending to be a woke person or not. But I do think... I saw real data on this. Something like 7 out of 10 psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever, lean left. And this is such a political issue, and I think people who lean left tend to suffer from a mental condition called feel sorry forism, or another way to put it is they're high on the compassion scale, so they're more likely to give in. I mean, can you imagine if my idea of having a panel of 5 psychologists that all 5 have to say, yes, this teenager should transition, it will actually save their life, blah, blah, blah. But you can alternate three Democrats, 2 Republicans, 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats. And it has to be unanimous. Oh, how many of you left wokeists out there would be for that? Not too many of you. Balls and ovaries are special and should be cherished and rubbed sometimes, but only by the right person. Amen. Yeah, by that loving spouse, that special someone.
This came originally from Holland. It was called the Dutch Protocol. But when it came to America, they got rid of some of the safeguards. Like in Holland, this was only for kids who had childhood onset gender dysphoria. not this rapid onset 14 years old. And they had to screen them for other comorbidities. They didn't start them on cross-sex hormones until 16. So far fewer kids would get this. When this came to the US, they got rid of the safeguards. They're given hormones at 13. Johanna Olsen-Kennedy, who runs the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, she's one of the top docs in the US. She got $5.7 million from the NIH for a research grant that went to UCSF, CHLA, Lurie Children's in Chicago, and Boston Children's. $5.7 million. As part of this, she got approval to reduce the age for cross-sex hormones from 13 to 8. Imagine giving an 8-year-old girl testosterone. It's always going to be girls because they're the ones hitting puberty at that age. It's required that they've already hit Tanner stage 2 of puberty. So that's going to be only girls.
Yeah. I'm very optimistic on this issue from my point of view. I'm going to say something. I should have titled it. I should have titled my live stream this. I am on the right side of history. Peter, Billboard Chris, whoever else is there, we are on the right side of history. And some people on the left, some woke people, you guys are going to find out in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, however long it takes, that you were on the wrong side of history. Just like with the trans sports thing, we're over the hump. Most people now, 2/3 of people in the US at least, no. If you were born a biological man, stay out of women's sports. This is when it comes to transitioning for minors, hormone blockers and surgeries. I predict maybe 2 years, 2 more years. And then more and more Democratic type politicians are going to come out and say, you know what? I think we got to stop this. I think we got to make laws that just says nope. That's already happening. But I mean, it's going to take another couple of years before all 50 states, no, we're not doing this anymore. Sorry. And then the Americans are going to say, sorry.
Let me ask you a question. This may make everybody uncomfortable, but I'm going to ask anyway. So I'm an atheist. You said you're a Christian. I think are you an atheist?
Yes. I'm agnostic.
You're agnostic.
Christian.
You're agnostic. Oh,
Basically, you're Billboard Chris, I have a beef with you. If you how can you basically be an agnostic? You're either an atheist or a theist. In terms of how you live your life, Billboard Chris. Take a stand. Just like you're taking a stand for this transitioning issue. Take a stand with this God issue.
what is your response to somebody who claims that the position that you hold, I guess this isn't for you, I guess it's just for you too. You're only holding that position because of yourself are harboring a delusion or a belief about reality, and you're criticizing this position from a religious position. So it's not that you've honestly and sincerely examined the evidence, it's that you have an ideological filter and you're looking at your landscape and you're targeting this particular belief.
Take religion out of it.
Okay, now it's important to realize that Peter's asking a Christian this question. I forget her answer, but my answer would be, look, there's atheists who agree with Christians on this issue. This is not a theist versus non-theist issue. It seems like it's more of a right versus left issue, but it's definitely not a Christian, Muslim, Jew versus atheist, agnostic issue.
Let's go back to the evidence and common sense then. What does the evidence state? What has Chris been talking about this entire time? Going back to children, they should not be allowed to transition. You know, and the funny thing too, me getting into politics has me just been using my brain, having common sense takes. Like, to be quite honest with you, I don't really talk about my religion when it does come to me going out on the streets. Like, I just try to be as neutral as possible and as common sense as possible, and allow people to, you know, speak about whatever issue. So when it comes to this issue as well, Same exact thing. Okay, tell me why you think you should transition. And from a common sense perspective, like this goes into the whole, like, what is a man, what is a woman type argument. Like at its base, a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and that is a biological fact. And us trying to transition children is not healthy for them. It has physical repercussions. It has mental
So you're
repercussions.
saying that this belief, this stance that you've adopted has nothing to do with your religion?
I've got an answer for this one.
Sure.
Whether you believe in God or evolution or both, this makes no sense. If you believe in God, this ideology teaches that God made us wrong.
Actually, there's someone in the live stream chat right now who said the exact same thing to me. I asked this question to a trans person. Who believes in God? Do you believe God, you were born in the wrong body? That God created you in the wrong body? Remember that, Gabriella? You're the same person, right? And you said, yes, God did create me in the wrong body, right?
If you believe in evolution, then this ideology is saying that 1 billion years of the process of natural selection has failed. And for the first time in human history, during this little 10-year blip, a pharmaceutical company is here to help our children be who they really are.
I guess the second, okay, so I guess the first argument, so for an example, in Iran, gender surgery is just not that big of a deal. I don't speak Farsi. My knowledge of Iran is very limited. I just get that from what I'm reading. But I think it's, excuse me, once you get out of the Judeo-Christian context, it's interesting to see cross-culturally how other religions look at that. And in terms of the and I'm not saying I agree or disagree with it. I mean,
well, in Iran, it's because you're not allowed to be gay.
Mm-hmm.
So the gay
I
man
think
transition.
that's a lot of it. Yeah,
That's absolutely it.
As Ahmadina Jonathan.
Wow. You're not allowed to be gay, so you have to transition. So you can. But if transitioning involves hormones and surgeries that will lead to you very rarely, if never, having orgasm, well, what good is it? You'll never be able to express your gayness anyhow.
Sexuals living in Iran.
Yeah, something like 5 or 6 years ago, the Iranian women's soccer team had 8 men on it.
Oh, interesting.
Because,
I did not know that.
Because they're the only Muslim country that has this thing about gender transition. And this goes back decades. I forget the exact story. I've read it a few times. But it's fine to transition. But you can't be gay. So you can die or you can transition. So it's not really about them being supportive of gender. It's just escape from death.
Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. This is on Peter Boghossian's channel. Links in the description. Go check it out. It's 1:34. I think I played 20 minutes, 30 minutes of it. But I used to say that gender was on a spectrum, which, a lot of trans people say, yay, good for you, Doug, good for you. But then I said there's only 2 sexes, and then you have intersex, which is a combination of those 2 sexes. But I'm starting to think, and I'm still brainstorming here, but and many other people have said this, I'm starting to think that we should just get rid of the word gender completely. In fact, I'll say it now. There is no such thing as gender. There is no such thing as gender. There's 2 sexes, only 2, and sometimes you have people with combinations of the 2 called intersex. But there's only 2 sexes, and there's no such thing as gender. But we have an infinite amount of personalities. And I've heard other people say this, and I've been thinking about it, and it actually makes sense to me. It resonates with my soul, my genderless soul. What do you guys think of that? So I think maybe from henceforth, I will say there is no such thing as gender. There's only people who do things, say things, express themselves in certain ways, who like things, who hate things. And they're either of one sex or the other. And very, very rarely a combination of both. And that's that. And we use certain pronouns to represent one sex, and we use certain pronouns to represent another sex. There's only two sexes, and there's no such thing as gender. Yeah. Sounds good to me. What's the downside of me saying that? What have I not explained in the world by saying that? Didn't Jesus say that? Yeah. Well, Jesus didn't say that. Men said that. Reported. No, and that's actually in the Old Testament. Or was it quoted in the New Testament? Yeah, I think it was. That's what it means that gender is socially constructed. Oh boy. Yep. Gender is reserved for language. Do masculine and feminine exist outside of biology? No, I would say. I'm a naturalist, remember? My ears are bleeding metaphorically. No such thing as gender. You might want to come in and refute that. I'm not throwing away terms like masculinity and femininity. I'm not throwing that away. Every XY combination is a different sex. False. There's only two sexes, Mitesh. Oh, sorry, that was loud. I just want to see if Mythvision is still talking about abiogenesis. And they just finished 13 minutes ago. How long is it? Hour and 30 minutes. Wonder if that's worth looking at. So you wouldn't say a dress is feminine? Yeah, I would say that dress is feminine. Is lipstick feminine? Yes, lipstick is feminine. I don't understand the point here. Can someone explain to me why these questions are being asked? I'll open up the room because I will want to see what kind of trouble I can get into. Steph, if you're here, you're welcome to join. I'm going to put the link up. Let me make this bigger. Sharpen that. Okay, so if you want to call in, just click the link. So where's the biology in a dress or lipstick? Well, the dress and the lipstick don't have biology. The humans who choose it do. They're the biology. You said masculine and feminine don't exist outside of biology. Well, no, they exist in forms like you can have a lipstick sitting on your desk and then all humans die and that lipstick is still there. I'm not sure what you're trying to get at. But when biology uses the lipstick, we call that feminine. Or I called it feminine, at least. Pulling up my computer to jump on. Well, good for you. It's better to call in with a real computer than a phone. Yeah, I think the whole issue of transitioning, the risk on kids, I think that whole quote of 1% regret of detransitioners is probably false. My intuition say it's closer to 50%, but I don't think we have good, strong data on that, and it's probably at least 50% regret. If the stats that Billboard Chris was citing were accurate, it could be as high as 83%. No, Supirod. Yes, Jeffeth. I've heard of them. Anybody can call in. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. So if you want to be on the right side of history, which I'm sure you do, then you want to think more like me. It's fun to say stuff like that. Gabe, you're still alive? Gabe, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I haven't seen you for a while. I thought you gave up on me.
You know, I have other things in life to do.
Good
live
for
life.
you. You know what? I respect you even more when someone comes on and says, I got more important things to do than watch your show. I mean, that's good.
Yeah.
Because most of the people
So,
in the
yeah.
live stream chat here are losers because they got nothing else to do.
I mean, I have plenty of losery habits myself, so it's all right. It's
What do you want to talk about, Gabe?
yeah. I guess I want to question why you feel so skeptical about the research currently done on suicidal ideation.
Remember what I said?
Yeah. So let me see. I'm going to try to steel man you, and you tell me if it's correct.
Okay.
From what I understand, what it seems to you is that it's okay, thoughts about suicide, but that's thoughts. That's not action. And that when people talk about in the research reduced suicidal ideation, it's basically they ask them if they were happier after some sort of treatment was done. And you're like, well, what value is that really for
Yeah, it's very
measuring-
nebulous. It's very subjective. It's very lived experience. It's very wishy-washy to a hard science guy like myself.
Right, but they're still using the same measure, right? Suicidal ideation. So it's not like I feel like you have to be saying that the whole measure of suicidal ideation is basically invalid.
Well, if someone just comes out and says, I thought about suicide, you can ask questions like, I think you can still, I'm not denying it as a metric, but it's still a wishy-washy one because, like if all you know, someone says to you, I have had suicidal thoughts. How seriously should one take that? Now,
That on its own actually doesn't mean much. I'll give you that.
yeah, and that's sort of what I'm getting at. You have to go so deep, and sometimes you can't even take their word for it because, like, they watch TV, they watch the internet, they watch movies, and if someone says, if I ask someone who has suicidal thoughts, okay, well, if you were to do it, how would you do it? And they have no idea. Well, then you really
plans are actually a very important part of
it's like
Yes, yeah.
and even if they do have an idea how they do it, you ask other questions like, well, have you bought this? And if they actually
Well,
have
let me
bought
ask
this,
though,
this, and this,
because usually there's more than one metric being involved in these studies. But let's just take suicidal ideation. But would you still agree that increased suicidal ideation is correlated with increased chance of committing suicide?
yes.
Yeah, so I guess that's my issue, which is it seems like
But that's like saying going out in a thunderstorm increases your risk of being hit by lightning. Big whoop-de deal.
I'm
That's
not
this.
quite understanding where you're coming from.
Okay. Increase in suicide ideation increases the risk of actual suicide, correct? We both agree.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. And are we both agreed that if you go out in a thunderstorm, that increases your risk of getting hit by lightning?
Yeah, I guess I don't understand how that is.
My point is,
similar.
my guess is the number of actual suicides, just like the number of actual lightning strikes, is so incredibly low.
But surely, have you looked at the experimental designs and seen that?
There is none. There is no data on actual suicide. No, I'm talking about actual suicides. This is my point.
Right, but I guess here's my point.
Gabe, let me make it incredibly clear to you. I do not care about suicide ideation increasing the risk of suicide because we don't have data on actual suicides.
Well, I know you're skeptical about that. That's my issue. My issue is because we agreed that increased suicidal ideation involves an increased chance of completing suicide.
Right, and having one cigar increases your risk of lung cancer.
Right, and your point seems to be that it's whatever increase it is, we're probably talking with low amounts to begin with, and it might. But here's
having a cheesecake increases your risk of cancer.
But my question is, how do you know that?
How do I know what?
Because you seem to be saying that this is the way that because there
I'm saying we don't know that. We don't know.
No, yeah, but agree or disagree. We have research involving suicidal ideation and trans people.
Right, and I say whoop-de-doo.
Right. So what I'm saying is,
so you have suicidal thoughts. Are you going to commit suicide? That's what we don't know.
Right. But my thing is, basically, here's what my point would be, and you can tell me if you agree or not, is that you seem to have to claim that there is a confound involved. That means that basically that the decrease in suicidal ideation basically is insignificant because there are other factors that make the amount of suicidal ideation basically not really important to begin with. So we're not.
Well, that's kind of a new topic, but I do agree with that. Like, there's so many other factors.
But that seems to be your claim. But I guess my question is, how are you so confident with that?
How I am confident in what we don't know because the data is not out there. I'm confident because the data is not out there.
Okay, so I'll use a loaded example. If we have evidence that increased smoking usage increases your chances of dying of cancer, like we could say, oh, well, there could be confounds, but at what point do we just say, well, at least the evidence we have on the table seems
we have data out there with smoking. We don't have the data out there for this trans issue.
I'm saying, though, is even if we had that correlational data, that seems to be some evidence to suggest, hey, maybe stop smoking.
Well, and I've admitted that. I said, going out into a thunderstorm increases your chances of getting hit by lightning.
So my question is then, like, assuming there was like some really decent control, best practices involved when it came to surgical transition. In principle, I don't see what the issue would be if we have some evidence suggesting that, hey, this does seem to reduce suicidal ideation, and reducing suicidal ideation is associated with reducing suicide attempts.
Okay, so that's the reward, right? The reward is if you transition a minor. We're talking about this in the context of minors, I hope, because I really don't care about. I don't care about.
I actually want to go there because I don't think most transitions happen when kids are minors.
Good.
So I actually want to stipulate.
Yeah. So
I think best practices is actually against that.
So you do realize that I'm okay with people transitioning as an adults.
Right, but I'm going to hold your feet to the fire a little bit though. But you recommend not really making sure that you're ready to transition until about age 28.
Correct. That's my opinion.
So
but if you're 21 or at 19, I would be uncomfortable. I would advise against it. But you're an adult, go do it.
But that's fair game to criticize, correct?
Criticize what? My opinion?
Waiting until 28.
Yeah, go ahead. Hang on. Are we on the same page with minors then?
I think there could be a few rare cases where, like, say, borderline 17, about to turn 17, maybe. I think the vast majority cases, no. Does that make sense?
So you say vast majority of the cases we agree. There might be a few cases where we disagree. Is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're mostly agreed on the minor issues because with me, the whole trans issue is about 3 or 4 different things. The minor issue, transitioning, it seems like we're mostly agreed there. Trans people in sports, I'm not sure if we agreed there or not. And the free speech issue on this, demonizing people in saying, calling them transphobes if they disagree. That's another issue I have. But if you want to talk about transitioning of adults, I mean, like legally it can do it if they have the money and they want to pay for it themselves. Like,
But you still think it's not the best idea, correct?
yeah, I will judge them as making a bad choice.
Right, and I guess that's what I'm pushing back on a little bit here. So yeah, I mean, listen, I am all for criticism. Like, I mean, I think any field that's completely insulated, that's just not a healthy environment for research, right? So bring on the criticism. I just want I want the research that's currently on the books to not just be swept away so easily, like by saying like, oh, I don't know psychology.
But like if we're talking about let's say a 30-year-old, none of this research even matters to me. It really doesn't, because I'm not trans.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, so
like if someone wants to risk ruining their life forever, that's their risk. Just like it is their risk to smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. Just don't ask me to pay for it.
And I think we've agreed before that you and me both at least have said that the trans issue isn't even necessarily our biggest issue, right? When it comes to politics and stuff.
Right.
Just based off of like what proportion of the population trans people actually even are.
Right. But it is important to me in the sense that it brings up a bigger issue, which is the more the free speech issue, the demonization of people that could impact doctors and nurses and psychologists. Like if you don't give certain care, you can be fired. If you don't use certain words to a certain person, you can be fired or maybe even put to jail in some countries like Canada. I mean, Canada's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you mentioned, 5 different things, and we could go on one of those there. But the main reason I wanted to call in was just about generally just talking about I guess my 2 cents is that just to consider the research on suicidal ideation, just to consider that a little bit more seriously, I guess. That's my gentle pushback. That's my main point for coming on, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
Because like as far as free speech, I mean, you've mentioned it yourself, like you definitely, have problems with what people would call wokeism usually. But you also have said that you feel like people crying about, being censored or being silenced, that usually people tend to overrate how big of an issue that is, even though you admit it does happen. Is that a fair way to put your position?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So listen, I'm fine with that. My whole point is I think that there is grains of truth within a lot of left-wing positions, even though I usually don't go as far as a lot of the people you see on Twitter.
Yeah. Another beef of mine is that so many people on the left, because I think it's personality types, because they have this feel sorry for gene, they end up not thinking objectively and rationally about these issues. They're more about Billy is crying. We need to help Billy. He's so sad.
I just don't agree. I think the right and the left have selective sorry forism. Like
I agree.
A little bit of sorry forism when it comes to women athletes, correct?
Yes, I agree with you. We all have it. It's just in different areas to different degrees. And I do think on this issue, the trans issue, it's definitely mostly the left feeling sorry for people.
In fact, you feel sorry for more people just because there's more female athletes than there are.
Yes, I am. Yeah. I'm more of a greater good type guy. I'm about the reducing the total net suffering, and so there's probably more biological females crying in sports than there are trans people crying because they couldn't do a sport. So
yeah, I just tend to think of it as such a niche issue. Like I think if you want to ask the empirical science,
not to Stephanie, who I reviewed today.
Yeah, if you want to ask the empirical scientific question, could men and biological men and biological women ever compete on the same playing field based off of some some criteria? My answer is yes. I think that could happen.
Like,
I think the criteria would have to be so ridiculously specific that it probably would never happen in real life. Like you'd have to have, hormone levels, testosterone levels, how many fast twitch muscle fibers. But like, I think people who care about sports don't really care that deeply, to be quite honest. Like,
care about what? They don't.
Having like basically classes of competitors based off of those metrics. Like it would almost take the fun out of sports.
I agree. That's why
get your nerd shit out of here.
I agree. That's why I said make it simple. If you're born with a
well, that's why women and men's sports is a very simple categorization.
If you're born with a penis, you go to men's category. If you're not born with a penis, you go to women's, and then there's going to be some very rare exceptions.
Here's my point. I think you can find men who are would be on a more competitive level with most women than say someone like a Serena Williams would be with other women in her.
But who cares about that? Just if you just
right. Well, exactly. Like that's why I think I don't really care too much about the sports issue. Like I think the world would be a better place if we had less sports scholarships and more people going to school for things that actually help make society better. But
when I was in high school, I was one of those guys who was in every clique. I was.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I was a jock. I was a nerd. I was a banger. These are 80s terms for the kids watching. There was guys in leather jackets. I was, hey man, how's it going? And there was the chess club. I was there. It's like. And so I can relate to, and so when you poo-poo sports and athletes as not being contributors to society, you must have missed my inspiring speech earlier where I said it is athletes, musicians, artists. Like athletes are kind of like artists. They inspire people to be better people.
But I also don't really shed many tears for a lot of failed artists. You know what I mean?
Boy, you sound more dead inside than me.
There's a lot of failed artists out there, Doug. You know what I mean? I'll put it this way. While I actually enjoy sports and participate in sports, I actually enjoy participating more than watching. The big thing for me is like I just don't lose a lot of sleep of, oh, the poor kid didn't get his sports scholarship. I'm like, I guess that's, but like, what system is it that's a huge priority when it comes to our educational system? It just seems so weird.
Well, let me try this argument on you. You tell me what you think. I think allowing biological men into women's sports is misogynistic.
Biological men into women's sports is misogynistic?
Yeah. What
the way things are probably currently set up, I'll give you the nice softball. The way things currently are set up, yes.
Like when you have, not even in sports, but when you have the woman of the year is a guy born with a penis, the best swimmer is woman swimmer is a guy born with a penis. All these things, like you're just taking women, you're slapping them in the face.
Well, I think you could also though argue that sports is inherently misogynistic.
Well, not women's sports.
Right, but sport. I mean, people talk about. I mean, John McEnroe, right?
Yeah.
Right. There's a sense in which, like, people asked him. Jon Stewart. Sorry, not Jon Stewart. Stephen Colbert asked him. Is why not think of Serena Williams? As the greatest tennis player of all time? And she's like, well, because I can name like 15 men who can beat her.
Right. That's true.
I mean,
well, not just 15.
There's a reason why
150.
The WNBA doesn't get the same numbers as the NBA.
Yeah, it's not even close.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's the question, though. Actually, since you brought this up, I do want to ask you this. You mentioned because men dominate in sports, right, that men are physically superior to women.
Yes. Because
men dominate in chess, does that mean men are mentally superior to women?
Good question. There might be a case for that. Yep. Because chess is a game of risk-taking. And a certain type, it's very similar to, like, a lot of people are scared to say this, but I'm not. Chess, I would equate to, let's say, conceptual ideas found in theoretical physics. Like you have to be able to conceptualize, risk take, And so there might be a biological reason why men, and a lot of people are going to hate me saying this, but the reason why you find men in physics, in chess, even poker. Poker is very mathematical and risk-taking and so forth. I think the science is in on that men tend to be more
Have you
risk-taking.
read Steven Pinker's opinions on this?
No, I don't read.
Because he makes some similar cases. There was actually a debate about this, about whether because I think when Milo came out talking about how men tend to hold up the extremes of the distribution, so like
Yes,
the worst,
oh yeah,
of the
yeah.
worst and the best of the best.
That's basically the same argument for the IQ thing.
Yes, very much along those. Yeah, we're getting into that kind of territory right now.
Yeah,
but
no, there
yeah, so-
there's more. There are more high IQ men than women, and there are more dumb, low IQ men than women. The distribution is wider. Women are more narrower.
I think what Steven Pinker seems to suggest, because he actually went into it, and it's been a while since I've looked at this actually, so I'm not going to pretend I know this off the back of my hand very well, but it seems like there are certain things that men tend to do better, and then there are a couple things that women tend to do better as well. I mean, I think you're probably cool with that nuance, right? When it comes to like mental rotation, apparently men are like really good at that compared to women or something like that. Like the idea of being able to take an object and in your mind, put it in the right position to be able to do whatever sort of complex.
Which would explain chess and physical, theoretical physics.
Yeah, I mean, is there a case to be made that it could be a lot of it could be environmental? It's like, yes, but I can't say for sure one way or another, right?
Well, if you say environmental, then you have to say things like nutrition, weather. Like, did that impact men differently than women?
I think what people on the left would say is there's all these people that are kind of gatekeeping and making it hard.
That's baloney. That's a way to make women not feel bad.
Why so dismissive, though?
Because
I don't even think you studied it. Well, actually, no, that might not be true. But
what you're saying could be true, but I do think that type of women just give them the chance is a way of feel sorry forism. It is the fear that if we were to admit, if it were true, that men are better at chess, are better at poker, are better at being physical theoretical physicists, that somehow makes women less worthy, less valued. This is the fear. And so there is in some people, there is a quick knee-jerk reaction to say, no, it's all because of society and how they were raised and blah, blah, blah.
Well, let's go down that rabbit trail, though. Why wouldn't they be less valuable?
I didn't say they would be.
In some sense.
I'm saying the perception is they might be, because some women would view themselves as, I'm not as smart as a man. Well,
right, and in some sense, well, I mean, you've flat out said that not all people are created equal, not all people are equally valuable, correct?
Right.
So what's wrong with saying that?
Well, it could be true, but the evidence is not there. The evidence is that on average, men and women are equal IQ, but you will find the distribution's wider for men. So therefore, you're going to have more high IQ'd men than women, and that explains why you might have more theoretical physicists, top-level chess players, these conceptual.
And why we have like more male delinquents, like it's the both ends.
Yes,
of the
but and the other end of the scale too. Yeah. But the smartest person who's ever lived, I think, was female. So there's All
right, but. That is true, but then if we go into some of Charles Murray's and like the race and IQ stuff, I don't think we're finding that both sides of the spectrum sort of thing. In that case, we're just seeing
on what issue.
So if you were to when it comes to like measuring IQ, when it comes between races and stuff like that, it's not like when we're talking about women, right? We could say, okay, they're more centralized in the distribution than men are, right?
Right.
But when it comes to different races, that's not the case. It's not just that like, they're just more centralized. They're not as much on the fringes of the.
Well, not based on race, but if you take like traditional IQ tests, you can definitely say that African countries do lower than European countries. That's non-controversial.
What do you think of IQ testing in general? Do you think they're like
depends on the IQ test? Like people will say, well, it's based on culture and these social constructed ideas of what's smart and what's not. And yeah, I can understand that. But there's some IQ tests that are purely they don't even have words or numbers. It's all shapes and patterns seeking and memory. And so if you're defining IQ,
Memory is a big one. Yeah, whenever I think of examples of like a legitimate, like why intelligence research is legitimate. So there's psychologists when I went to school, my professors, were like, just don't even get into this stuff. And I'm like, well, there's some legitimate metrics because IQ is a composite measure,
right,
of several different measurements, and people don't realize like working memory is a huge one of those.
like
if
the LSAT.
if you can't keep a bunch of things in your mind, you can't solve problems. Like processing speed is another one. How
Yes.
quickly can you go through these
Yeah.
things?
So now, if you were to remove the more socially constructed IQ tests like the GRE, the LSAT, which are basically types of IQ tests, even though they don't admit it or don't want to say it, and just replace them with these memory type tests, pattern seeking, conceptual tests. And if you were to do it by what we call race by race and give it to people, to 10,000 people in every generic race category, but even then, like, how do you do that? Because there's so many interbreeding.
Oh yeah,
but
sure.
you could actually say that some races have higher or lower IQ than others based on that test.
No, you mentioned other countries, but let's say like within the U.S., it's kind of hard for me because, gosh, I haven't looked at like research on the genetics of race very much, but it seems like there's actually a lot more shared genetics between people who have different skin color than we tend to admit, right? So do you know how much of this research is just based off of, oh, this person looks darker, so we're putting them in this category, this person is white on the outside, versus like, yeah, that's why I guess. So maybe we're flip-flopping. I'm a little more cautious about this research. Maybe.
Well, to me, like, race is kind of stupid because
I agree,
yeah, there's definitely, my wife definitely has way more melanin in her skin than I do, and certain other features are different and so forth. But our kids, like, they're almost a perfect combination of us two, and and that's happening more and more. And in another 1,000 years, we're all going to be like Cocoa Puff type shades, caramel.
Yeah.
There will be no race left.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I will hear. I'm going to give you some props a little bit on areas where I feel like I'm identifying more with your politics. Does that sound good?
Yeah,
real fast.
Yeah, real fast, because Bert wants to, and he
Sure,
doesn't like me, so this will be fun.
Well, I'm caring less for people, so I think you'll be proud of me.
Oh, good.
Just generally, you know what it is though. So I'm giving, I think, credit where credit is due to conservatives. You see some of the darkness in this world, and you realize that like a lot of people, most people have done something really messed up in their life, like something that's just like terrible. And there's a point in your life and you're just like, you just can't change all the terrible things in the world. And at some point, you just have to start living life to try to make your life better and kind of ignore some of that other stuff. And I think that factors in a little bit to conservative reasoning. Do you think that's fair to say?
No.
Why not?
I think you're basically calling conservatives more selfish.
Yeah, I would lean that. I would say that the whole idea of, well, I think they recognize humans as more selfish. And then they realize that, hey, you might as well take care of your own because you can't just change everybody to be non-selfish.
No, I don't think that's where the divide is. I'm more aligned with Jonathan Haidt's work of, and selfishness wasn't one of them. It's more like fairness, in group, purity, those sort of things. This is what makes conservatives and non-conservatives different. So, like, and it bleeds into other areas, like law and order is more of a conservative thing. Like, you won't find as much looting and rioting in a red state compared to a blue state, at least in the last couple years. And it's because, it's just, there's less tolerance for certain, like private property, for example. I think it's valued more, a little bit more, not a lot more, on the right versus left. Like on the right, some people are willing to die and be killed for their property. On the left, not there's a little less.
But I actually think that might play to my point just a little bit, because I think the reason why they value private property is this kind of idea of
Selfishness.
yeah, but I mean it's more complex than that. But yeah, basically the idea is, hey, what's mine is mine. Sure, it might be unfair that I have more and you didn't, and just by birth I have it, but who cares? It's like we're all born into life. Life is unfair, and we should still respect these things, even though it's not completely fair.
Yeah, but you can flip it and say that they would also defend someone else's property, and they these whole ideas of a private ownership, that it's not just for them, it's for others, and that we should respect everybody's property, and that people who take from others, that's bad, and we should look them in the eyes and say you're a bad person.
Yeah, I think I would agree that it's more complicated than just, yeah, conservatives more selfish. But I still would say this. I would still say even the idea of protecting everybody's private property, it still kind of has a self, it still benefits yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because, oh, I'm not just talking about me.
But no more than left-wingers.
Right, but the point the left would say is even in doing that, there's still some people who kind of get screwed over by no other fault of the people's own than the fact that they were born into it.
Yeah, that's true. But I think the difference between someone who would lean right and someone who would lean left, with people who are disadvantaged, born like either with physical problems or into a really bad environment, is a conservative, someone who leans right, would say, look, don't let your circumstances get you down. You can do this. You can be the best version of yourself. Don't give up. Don't strive to be the best you can be. Whereas someone on the left would say, it's not your fault. I mean, all these pressures around you. Keep looking to the past and see how this systemic racism has put you down. It's not your fault. Like they're the Goodwill Hunting, the scene with, it's not your fault, and they give a big hug.
Oh yeah, with Robin Williams.
Yeah.
Matt Damon. Don't fuck with me, man.
So I would say that someone who leans right is more of the encouragement of be the best you can be, take active steps, look more to the future. Whereas someone on the left would say, look more to the past. I mean, I
think it depends, and then I'll let you go after this. It's like, because I think there's also people on the left who recognize inequality, and like think of like the great race leaders and stuff like that. But like it's a valiant struggle, to even though life isn't fair, there's still value and meaning in fighting against the injustice. And I think there are some people on the right, and this is maybe more where I fall in, is there's people who legitimately see the terrible things in life, and they realize, hey, listen, there are some people who are going to try their best. And through no fault of their own, just because life is brutal and ruthless, they're going to get screwed over and tough cookies. That's just going to happen to some people. And there's nothing we can do about it. And we just need to accept that.
Well, I don't think a conservative would say we just need to accept legitimate, injustices.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that like people will try to pull themselves up from their own bootstraps, and just because life is brutal and unfair sometimes they're just going to get royally screwed over through no fault of their own.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's just life, and that's just something we have to accept.
Yep. Well, yeah, you have to accept that you could die tomorrow crossing the street. You got to accept the fact that you're not special. You got to accept the fact that you're
right. And I think they would equate some of that stuff, to like the idea of just being hit by a car. It's like, well, there's no fairness in that, but it happens. It's like, yeah.
The key is to be able to realize all these things and not be a nihilist. And somehow I've managed to do it. I don't know how, but I realize I'm not special. I mean, people are all, I guess, special in a certain way. Like not everybody's identical, but in terms of there's always going to be someone smarter than you. There's always going to be someone better looking than you. There's always going to be someone richer than you. There's whatever metric you can think of, someone's going to beat you. And so you just gotta, you know what it is, Gabe? I think the reason why I'm not a nihilist and I can sort of be settled in who I am, knowing that I'm not special and that I'm just a speck in the universe, not even a speck, is that I've taken so many tests in my life in various fields
Okay.
because I had to, going into graduate school, going to other schools, that I know exactly where I am at on the intelligence scale. I know I'm pretty darn near confident close of where I am on the spectrum of intelligence. Even I did sports. I know where I'm at in physically when I was in high school, in college, whatever. And so I am not insecure about who I am. I know who I am when it comes to academics, sports, strength, whatever the metric is.
And you're not a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude?
Exactly. And so many people, like I see this on my channel, on this channel, on the other channel. Like when I see people pushing back and getting defensive, getting insecure, using the words mock right away or irrational right away, or these type of that's a logical fallacy. Whenever I see people do that very quickly, I think they've never actually been tested. They don't know where they're at, and they're trying to find out where they're at. They're trying to find out who they are. They're seeing if they can compete against me or someone else in the comments and outwit them, outsmart them, either in rhetoric or in facts. But people who know who they are, they don't need to do that.
So then why do you think you're drawn to these kind of similar spaces that with people who are doing that kind of stuff? There's nothing in you that
well, with the religious channel, it's because
some need a validation or anything like that?
Well, with the religious channel, it's because I was a Christian for half my life. So that explains that. And I do enjoy I can't see your face, but if you and I were talking and I said something that you hadn't thought of, there's your eyes get wider. There's a little dopamine hit. It's like a drug. And so I do this for the high.
Yeah.
It's like I used to run half marathons, and I don't need to take heroin or cocaine or any other type of drug. Dopamine is enough for me, and maybe caffeine and nicotine. But dopamine is one of the best drugs nature's given us.
Sorry, I'm just thinking of a Christian song where it says Christ is enough for me and just replacing the word dopamine into that song.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Gabe.
Have a good one.
See ya. Why do you do your channel, Doug? For the drugs. Bert, are you blastasticful?
Sorry?
Are you blastasticful in the comments?
No, I'm Dogs Are Gods.
Oh, okay. Because he's supposed to call in sometime too. But anyhow, what did you want to talk about? I know we've talked before, right?
Yeah, I've made some spicy comments on some of your videos.
But haven't we talked face to face before?
No, I don't think so. No.
Oh, okay. I thought we had.
You must be thinking of someone else who's dark-haired and handsome.
You know what? I think that I am thinking about another guy named Bert. The guy I'm thinking about leans pretty far left and doesn't like me. Are you that person?
Oh,
you are
maybe.
him.
Well, we haven't talked face to face, but I've made a few comments as Bert. They used to be my YouTube name.
Okay. Well, what did you want to talk about today?
Well, I was listening to the idea of the gap between men and women, and I've read, a bit of the research on this about brain plasticity and the idea that a lot of these inherent differences between men and women when it comes to intelligence and ability to think in 3D, as you mentioned, they exist, but it exists potentially because it was developed more as an early child, and the brain has physically developed to do those things.
So you're saying that the reason why, sorry, the gap you're talking about, when you said gap, you're talking about intellectual gap?
The gap between abilities or between wants. So like, girls want to play Barbies and house, boys want to play trucks and building. So that sort of gap.
Oh, okay. And you're basically saying this is just a social construct taught by parents?
No, there's probably some very, very, very minor inherent genetic or hormonal cause for it, but then that's expanded on over time by the social interactions.
Okay. Yeah, I have no dispute with that.
Cool. I didn't think you would.
No.
I just wanted to put it out there.
Okay.
But do you think that would mean that we could potentially socialize women to be more like builders and architects and theoretical physicists?
Let's not go crazy, Bert. Like, you're talking nonsense now. Like, you know,
I don't know. My mom was
you-
very strong. She could build something.
No, I have a sister who's like a farm girl. So, but I think, yeah, maybe with another 100 million years, maybe, of evolution.
You think it's that deeply ingrained?
Yeah, I think so. I think the risk taking and the empathy because of the nesting in women, the fact that they have another human being in them for 9 months, that's pretty hard to overcome.
Yeah, it could be. Or it could be that women are already risk takers. They just don't do it in the same way that men do. And it's been socialized to be less of a risk taker with jumping out of trees or
Well, that could be
running
true.
through
That we're-
scary fields.
Yeah, that could be true that we're risk taking in different areas. Like, I know the whole emotional thing that people say women are more emotional than men, and I agree that's not true, but it is true that women tend to be more emotional about negative things, and did I say men or women? Women tend to be more emotional about negative things, and men tend to be more emotional about positive things. So this is why you see guys go watch the Super Bowl and paint their face, and not women. You know, it's like, yeah. Whereas women, like, and this is part of the risk aversion as well, is like, it's like if you harm someone, this is why women tend to be 60% Democrats. It's the party of compassion, right? It's 60% women. And I think that explains it.
Well, I think that women are Democrats more often because they're just more rational.
Okay. Yeah, so I take it you're married and you don't like sleeping on the couch?
No, I love sleeping on the couch.
Oh,
Like I love sleeping alone. That's my favorite thing is to just be alone.
We
in a
have
big
that in
bed or on a
common.
couch by myself. But I can't do it. I just can't. I get dragged into bed every single night. She's on the couch. I'm ready to go to sleep, and she's, "Come on, we've got to go to bed. Come on, we've got to go to bed."
She
Just
needs
so
that big,
she likes
strong
to-
man to protect her so she can sleep well.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think it's so in the middle of the night the kids wake me as well as her, so that we're both very tired in the morning.
Yeah, no,
I'm sure you understand that.
I think men and women who are married should sleep in separate bedrooms.
Really?
Yes.
Now that's a spicy take, Doug. That's too.
It's the
far.
truth, and it will save marriages. I mean, is your wife there? You want me to talk to her for you?
No, she's at work. I'm a stay-at-home dad at the moment
No.
with a broken ankle.
Oh, okay. But
Yeah.
be honest with me. Would you rather sleep alone at night or with your wife? She won't.
I
She won't
think
watch this.
at this point, I'd rather sleep with my wife.
Seriously? Didn't you just say earlier about you love to sleep on the couch?
I do. I love to sleep on the couch, but
By
I think
yourself?
I'd rather sleep with my wife for the health of the marriage and that sort of thing.
Okay, but let's say your wife was okay with it. Okay, she came up to you and said, "Hey, my lover Bert, I mean, I'm totally okay if you want your own room. I mean, I'm fine. Our marriage, as long as we have sex and coitus and everything, all that's still good. Your marriage is not negatively impacted. You would take your own room, wouldn't you, Bert?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah, I got no problem with that. But I think in the real world, probably the best advice I can give a married couple is keep that intimacy as much as possible. So like in the morning, if your kids aren't awake yet, just go have a shower together. It's good. Be naked together. Have fun like that. Doesn't have to be full like sexual something, but go have a shower, wash each other's bodies, something beautiful. You can think about it for the rest of the day. So you're not, wanting to open
Bert,
your phone and
my
look at
wife,
porn or something.
my wife still hasn't seen me naked. I mean, I was raised Mennonite. when we have coitus, all the lights are off, the music's turned up, but
You've got the scissors for the sheet, cut a hole.
when we reach retirement age, then I'm going to do the final unveiling, and it's going to be great. And,
Do you think men have more hang-ups about their body at the moment than women, or it's getting more to parity?
no, I think men have more hang-ups about their body. No, I think women have more hang-ups about their body than men. When's the last time you put something on, Bert, and gone to your wife and said, "Does these slacks make my hips look too wide?"
Well, it goes the other way. What I do is I take my pants off and then go, "It's a bit cold in here. Do I look big enough?" That's what happens.
Yeah. No, I think because men are more visual than women when it comes to arousal, women are more about touch and words, audible, but men are more visual, and women want to please men for various reasons. They're going to be more subconscious about their looks.
Okay, that's a fair enough call. Do you think you get any prescriptions from the gender gap?
What?
Like what we should do as different genders? Do you think that we should push women towards certain roles or push men towards certain roles? Or are you happy to just let life find a way?
Oh, no, I think certain roles are better suited for men and certain roles are better suited for women. So
Do you think society should move them towards those roles?
Yeah, but there's probably not too many roles that I would encourage the pushing, and I wouldn't say that there can't be exceptions, but I think when it comes to police, fire, and military, that's more of a man's job.
Really?
Yep.
I could say fire just because of the physicality.
Yeah.
Military, I suppose. For the
My
same
whole
reason.
argument's based on physicality. So if you want to bring up exceptions based non-based, then I'm going to say yes, I agree.
Well, what I want to bring up is police. I think police, it should be the opposite. There should be more women in the police force.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
Um,
But now,
maybe in the US.
what about women's push? What are more women's roles? I think elementary school teachers, K through 3 or 4, or something like that. I think raising children, birth to, let's say, age 6 is more suited for women. I think raising teenagers is more suited for men. I do think teenagers, especially boys, need to be fearful a little bit, just a scotch, of their fathers, that when they say don't go out tonight, that they, just mom said that. What's she going to do about it? But when a dad says that, who can, how old are your kids?
6 and 4.
Okay. Boy, girl, both?
Boys older, girls younger.
Okay, perfect. You got a nice combination there. At some point, your boy is going to be a teenager, and he's going to realize that mom can't touch him. Mom can't do anything physically against him. Can't restrain him, whatever. But you look like a pretty big guy, Bert. You could harmlessly restrain him, withhold him. You give him one big bear hug, he's not moving, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what men are good for when it comes to raising kids. When you got a rebellious teenager who needs restraining, a father is going to take care of that, which a mother probably can't do. Of course, there's exceptions.
I think that's a very, very minor sliver of the child raising, though. I think
that's
in
huge.
those early periods.
That's it. That's the most important. This is why we have crime in the United States.
No.
Yes.
Not even close. No. You've got crime because you've got guns and a society full of people in prison. That's why you've got crime.
My dad on the farm had tons of guns. I was raised on a farm.
Yeah, on a farm.
Yeah, I was raised on a farm with tons of guns. I never did any crime. Why is that?
Because you were on a farm.
No, but
there was an actual use for
there. I could have found people to
use to just kill people.
I could have found people to kill people. I had neighbors.
Yeah.
I had a vehicle. Why? The reason why I was raised in a household of guns and never committed any crime Because my dad raised me well.
Potentially, but you're a large percentage of the US population, and the others, the ones on either side of you, the ones that are too insane for one reason or too insane for another reason, or have bad parents, or any of the many factors that will cause a child to pick up a gun and want to do harm to other people, they have easy access to these guns. They use these guns. Like, I understand guns in farming or sports shooting, just not in the general population.
What explains people who are raised in guns in an urban area even and never used it for criminal activities? What explains them?
Same thing, good parents like you.
Good parents, right. And that's my point that's why I pushed back against you when you said it, fatherhood with teenage boys is just a small sliver. No, it's men who commit most of the physical violence in the United States, not women. And it's typically men who are from foster homes or from single mother homes.
Yeah.
If you could actually,
so when I said,
if you could Thanos out, Thanos, poof, gone. Every boy who's been raised in a foster home and every boy that's been raised in a single mother home, the amount of crime in the United States would plummet. It wouldn't go to zero, but it would probably go from 100% down to 20.
Yeah, it's true, but I'm in Australia. The amount of crime in Australia is nothing compared to the US, honestly. So it's one of those things where you compare, that male population in Australia versus the male population in the US, and the severity of the crimes that are committed in Australia are much, 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 much lower.
That's because,
but this
that's because you're a passive group.
I don't know. You haven't been down a pub on fucking 8 o'clock at night after a footy game. I swear to God.
What is
the punch on then?
What is the crime rates in Australia?
Oh, I don't know. I looked at it a while ago, but it's much lower. What I want to say about this fatherhood thing is I think that physical restraint aspect is what is very small. But besides that, yeah, fathers in the home, best possible thing.
Yep.
But I think that's true for early kids as well, because it gives you an idea of empathy towards men and seeing men as something that are more than just like a two-dimensional object of dad goes out, he makes money, he comes back. You can actually see that you, as particularly raising boys, you can develop more than just being that stereotype of going out, making money, providing for the family. You can be going out, providing for the family, and then actually developing interpersonal relationships that'll be good for that kid growing up. If they can develop like a personal relationship with people in their life, it'll lead to less depression, less suicide, less crime. It potentially is one of the reasons why the suicide rate is so high in men, is because there were less fathers at home giving that love and empathy.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Yeah, no disagreement for me there. I do think though that sometimes it is warranted to suck up your feelings and push them down.
Can you give an example?
Military, police, fire. Like, men are human beings with real feelings and emotions, agreed. But you can't be courageous if there's no fear. Like, you can't be courageous if there's no danger that makes you like uncomfortable. And sometimes being a real man means staring this fear and uncomfortableness down the barrel, looking at it right in the eye and saying, I'm going to overcome this. Like, I don't care how I feel right now. I got a job to do. I do not care how I feel. I got a job to do. And good for the men who can do that in those specific times. Now, I'm not advocating that you stuff all your feelings in a jar and then go to the mall and kill everybody. That I'm against. But there is a time and place where you need to ignore your feelings to get a job done. Disagree? Agree?
Broadly, I agree. Yeah. I mean, you gave enough caveats that I'm not going to punish you for saying something that isn't true in all instances, right? I'm not a pedantic shithead.
Australia's a little bit better on crime than the United States, but not much. I'm just looking it up. You know which countries have the worst crime?
Probably very densely populated countries, very urban countries, poor countries.
Yeah. There's a correlation between, yeah.
Yeah.
South America. It's where all the Catholics are. Let's blame the.
Yeah, it's because they smash out 30 kids and then everyone in the family's poor.
Yeah. Hey, you're singing my tune. Crime rate by country. This is World Population Review. South America is a mess.
Mm-hmm.
Middle East, southern part of Africa, a mess. Eastern Europe. What country is this? That's not
Poland, maybe?
Yeah, it looks like Poland. Shame on you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to talk about? Like, where do you lean politically? You're left because you're in Australia.
I am. I'm very left. Yeah, very, very left.
Why do you?
I think we should be.
Why do you watch me?
Oh, go ahead. I watch all sorts of political content, but I watch you because you seem to be rational and coming from it from a different political aspect to me. So I'm very interested in how you rationally come to your positions.
Good. Yeah, I advocate that people watch people they disagree with. What's the thing that you most disagree with me of all the things you've listened to?
I guess just advocating voting for conservatives.
Why is that bad?
Because they're a failure of a political ideology.
What did they most failed at?
I'd say in intergenerational poverty is probably their biggest failure.
Okay. So if people voted less conservative, there'd be less poverty.
Yeah, less poverty, but particularly that intergenerational poverty.
Intergenerational, yeah. I think you kind of alluded to the main reason for intergenerational poverty. It's not conservatives. You already said it.
With the fatherlessness?
No.
No?
It's having kids you can't afford.
But that's a relative term. Can afford, right? If the state pays for
definition of poverty.
education,
Let's say you've defined poverty, and let's say you fit the definition of poverty. Should you have kids? What's your opinion?
No, you shouldn't have kids.
Right. Okay. So now imagine that no kids are born in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there'd be less cyclical poverty? Intergenerational?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, that has nothing to do with conservatism.
Of course it does. Because conservatives will say it is the onus of the person not to get pregnant and then not to have that child. And then it happens anyway because that's just reality.
So now you're a conservative because you said you're a conservative. Because you said that if you didn't have kids in poverty, I got to ask you this: do you desire children to be born in poverty? No, of course not. And you also said that a way to get rid of kids born in poverty is not to have kids when you're in poverty. And this is something conservatives advocate of you choose not to have kids. You just don't do it. So that being a conservative would accomplish that goal.
No, it wouldn't, because it doesn't happen like that.
Oh, okay. It would, if it did happen that way, it would work. I mean, but you're just you're denying that
if wishes
people
were
could
horses
choose.
and beggars would ride.
You're denying that people can actually choose their reproduction?
No, I'm denying that they do.
You're denying that people actually do choose their reproduction?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So what conservatives will do is they'll say, we can just completely change human nature in every aspect. It's fine. Just like make people choose to be better people, and then that'll solve the problem. Whereas a progressive or a left-wing sort of person would say something along the lines of, if we change the shape of society and we get rid of these certain, issues, then people will begin to change, or we can control the negatives that come out of people choosing incorrectly. And I think that has historically worked out a lot better. So,
well, I partially agree with you, like that the environment around people really shapes decisions like family building, when to build a family. But it doesn't have to come from the government, right?
I mean, I think it does. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, it's the only tool broad enough and strong enough and financially viable enough to do it.
Really? So I would say religion is more powerful than the government.
Religion would be possibly more powerful just at the social side of things. You can get people to do things religiously, but people are still going to make those mistakes, and religion isn't then going
But
to...
the fear of hell can really motivate people.
Maybe to not kill, but if you're there and you see some handsome lad and you're
Bert, I can tell you the truth.
young girl...
I'll tell you the truth. I never fornicated when I was a teenager. There was because of the fear of hell. It worked.
I'm sorry to hear.
No, it worked for that goal. Like,
but does it work on the broad scale as like population groups?
Well, it depends on, like, if you're in a population group that doesn't have the fear of hell, then of course it's not going to work. But I think government's not the only way. I think you can use things like religion. I wouldn't advocate religion, but you could use education, like simple education of telling people, show a person two pictures, a picture of someone homeless on a street doing drugs, or a person, middle class, mowing their grass with a white picket fence. As which life do you want? You could try this with your kids as they get older. Show them those two pictures and ask them which life do you want? And
yeah, they'll want the life their dad has, suburban, happy life with a family.
Right. And then ask them, well, what do you, then give them choices or options. Here's option A, here's options B. Option A is, study, do your homework, be on time for classes, be on time for work. Other one is hang out with the wrong crowd that does drugs, don't care about your homework or whatever. Which option would lead to which picture? These are very simple questions that you can teach kids that has nothing to do with the government.
Yeah, that all makes sense. But the problem is when that doesn't work, when you've taught them that these options exist and they should take the better course. And then something happens, like they meet someone they think is a good egg, and then they're at a house party one day.
Oh yeah, people make mistakes.
I've done it a dozen times, let's just do it. Or, hey, it's okay, I don't have a condom, but let's just go for it. And people make mistakes, and then you need the government or you need some group to step in and deal with those mistakes. And since it happens on a society-wide level, the only way to change society in a large scale seems to be the government, to deal with these externalities, to make the intergenerational changes.
Yeah, like my dad taught me, he never ever came down on me for making a mistake. And I've made a lot of mistakes as a kid growing up, but he was very upset when I made the same mistake twice. I mean, he was irate. He said, that tells me you have not learned from the prior mistake. Like one time I put a huge dent in his brand new red Chevy truck. And I was terrified. I was almost peeing my pants that he was going to do something really horrible to me. He didn't say anything bad. He said, hey, mistakes happen. But then the next time I dented one of his vehicles, he was not so gracious. But I totally disagree with you that government can be a way, but are you saying it's the only way?
The only way currently, like if technology advanced more, maybe we can zap it into people's brains.
Zap it into people's brains.
Sorry, I got my daughter here. She's homesick today. So I think the government's the only way to realistically do it, because you've brought up a lot of things that, sure, logically they could work, and in a perfect world they could work, or in some nice family like yours they could work. But for like a single parent who's living in a less than nice area, and everyone around them's doing bad things, or in the school there's a huge percentage of the kids that aren't going to graduate, they're just going to go on to crime, or they're going to drop out and go on to crime, or get pregnant, or do risky behavior when they're younger. I don't think this idea of just talking to them rationally is going to work. I think you need an apparatus to step in to provide them with an actual real world example of what happens when you remove poverty and increase education. And the government's the only thing that can do that.
So do what exactly? Like, what exactly is the government doing?
So one of the best things they can do is have more social programs geared towards getting kids off the streets and into, like, say, sporting.
Away from their
or
parents.
Into, well, potentially away from boredom and needing to fill it with something, right? If you're bored and you want to not be bored.
Okay, but is that a
and you've got
Band-Aid,
nothing
or is
good
that
around.
is that actually attacking the problem? What's the fundamental problem? Why are they on the
The
street?
fundamental
Why are they on the
the
streets?
fundamental problem the fundamental problem is just you know, in the evening, if they've got no apparatus around them, like parents, like two parents that can take them to extracurricular programs or good friends, if they're in a bad area, they're probably going to
Okay, so okay, we're getting closer. Where I'm peeling the onion to the root problem. How does the government get these parents to, or these households to have two parents?
It doesn't. The best they can do is tax incentives.
Tax incentives.
But that's, I think, the best thing that's happened so far has been the tax exemptions for things like, you know, you live in a 2-parent household, you pay less tax maybe.
Yeah, but if you're a single parent home, or if you're poor, you're not paying taxes anyhow, so tax incentives don't work.
Yeah.
So the government's not actually addressing the root problem then.
You can address a more fundamental problem than just the parent missing, right? Because the parent missing causes a problem.
Right.
And if
So
you can address
how does
that
the government
problem,
fix that?
by engaging with the kids, stepping in as sort of like an Uber parent, as it were, like a government is the parent in that case, where they provide social programs like a parent would provide social, sort of like an emotional interaction and develop relationships in a positive light.
Okay. Would you agree then that a best way, because these kids are going to grow up and someday maybe have kids,
and they'll be more likely to be in 2-parent households if they've had, you know, positive young environment with decent education and not engage in that risky behavior.
Okay. Now, do we have real data on this? Like, does it work?
Yeah.
Like, there's a ton of
Scandinavian model.
There's a ton of after school programs in the United States, and it seems like poverty is still there, and single parent homes are still there.
Yeah. So those after school programs, they seem to focus on, if you've got your parents and you want to go do like a sport, you do a sport. But then there's these broad, like, community-oriented sort of programs. So you can have like a youth center, and the youth center will have some sports and activities, and they'll have social workers at the youth center. You know, even just skate parks with good lighting and, you know, the occasional security guard to stop kids doing anything too risky.
But everything you're mentioning, I don't disagree with. It's great to have skate parks with lighting and after-school programs and sports. All that I agree with it. But help me understand why the government has to do this and not private industry. Like, private industry can do a lot of great things, like build gymnasiums. There's many foundations that help kids. Why does it have to be government?
Because the government has no incentive to just profit off it.
Well, no,
they're never going to have the risk.
There's nonprofits that help kids.
Mm-hmm. But they can't get consistent funding. So in an ideal world, again, if we were some libertarian society where people chose to give money in the same way they give taxes, then yeah, this could potentially work. I agree with you on that. But I don't think, again, that's plausible. Libertarianism is one of the dumbest ideologies out there, next to, I don't know, like a pure socialist.
So you're saying that government, you could have private industry do it, or private non-profits do it, but you're saying that government's still better because they have consistent funding, i.e. taxes.
Yes, they have consistent funding, so the program's likely to continue through the course of, you know, years and years and years of children's lives to actually make a change to society rather than a change to one or two.
If a nonprofit showed you that they've had consistent funding for the last 50 years and they got a bank full of money that they can spend and keep things going, and they're not doing it for profit, every penny is, you know, minus administration costs of 4% or whatever, you'd be okay with that? It's non-government.
Yeah, I've got no problem with non-profits stepping in and doing things. It's just, again, this is the idea between logically and functionally. logically, sure, they could do it. In some niche cases, they can do it. But functionally, the only way we've seen this happen is large-scale government through taxation.
No, but you've seen private industries do great things too, right?
Yeah, small-scale, niche, like things. Like private industry is great. I don't want some communist society, but at the end of the day, when it comes to like trying to change society as a whole, I think the only way to do it is society inputting through government.
Okay, so let's say you wanted to help some problem area in Australia of, let's say, single-parent homes or whatever, high crime rates, and you had a choice of just sending your tax dollars to the Australian government and then voting for people who would take that money and provide programs for these people. Or another choice is you could actually go to a charity dinner where they tell you what they're planning to do. You say, yeah, this is a great idea. I want to support this. You write a check right there. You shake the hands of the people you meet, and then you yourself know the people who are doing this, and you can check up on them every month. How's it going? You can see what they're building. What would you prefer?
Government.
Whoa. I think you're saying
because you can do all that with the government.
No, you can't.
You don't do like the handshake, write a check thing.
Right, but that's important.
Taxes. But there's accountability still. There's a system for you to change it through voting. And you can look into the funding and how the funding is spent. You can even become a part of it just by going there and saying, hey, I want a job for this government group.
I need to write a picture here. So I'm just going to do this visually. Imagine in your head. So here's the people who need help. And then these are the people who help them. Mm-hmm. And the funding comes from the government. And here's you. So you got four things, okay? People who need help, the people who are helping them, the government that's providing the money for them, and then you, the taxpayer. I'm saying, let's remove the government. Boop. Let's get rid of the middleman. It's more efficient. Let's just get
it's less efficient.
Well, we still have to pay the government money. They can't work for free.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it more efficient for the government to spend more money on more administration?
Because you know exactly how much money you're going to get.
Well, I'm saying with the private, you will too.
No, it would fluctuate year on year.
I'm saying they got more money than the government. The government's in debt. They don't have any. Well, the United States government is running a deficit every year. They have no money. They print it.
Of course, they've got money.
No, well,
running a deficit doesn't mean you have no money.
They're borrowing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that economic activity in
this charity's not borrowing it.
Increase the amount of money they can take off tax, which then
the government's paying interest on that borrowed money. The private industry isn't. They got the cash. They're not paying it. They're not wasting money on interest payments. That money, that every dollar that goes to paying the interest, could be paid to help the kids.
Yeah, sure, that sounds fine. But again, it would fluctuate year to year, wouldn't it?
No, I'm saying
that's the problem with.
I'm saying the money's there. It's in the bank. There's Bert, you know this is true. There's private foundations that have so much money that the interest they receive, they're not paying interest. They're receiving interest on that money, and they can doing great things with it.
Yeah, that's fine. They
like
do
the
that.
Bill Gates
but
Foundation.
If you wanted to actually set up a program, then the best way to set it up is through the government, because you know how to be consistent. The Bill Gates program has delved into an area, done something in the area, and then decided it's not working. We'll just walk away.
Why do you love government so much?
NGO clubs.
Like I've admitted that the government
works, Doug. It works.
I've admitted that the government can do it and has done it and has worked. But I'm also saying that so has private foundations and industries done it. It works. And you're saying no, government. Why are you so?
Yeah,
why are you so dogmatic on government?
NGOs can work. They do work. But it's just that if you want to look for the best, like potential, like actual potential, something that we know has happened before, inductively we want it to happen again, the best way to do that has always been government.
But the way you define best is on the results or on the consistency of the cash flow coming in. How do you define best?
The results and the scale.
Where's your
When
data?
was the last time?
Where's your data that government can do better, has better results than private industry on, let's say, a very specific thing, like after school programs or something? Do you have
The
data?
discrepancy between different governments. So if you look at the most socialized government, the most
No, not between governments. I'm saying government versus non-government. Where's your data
Yeah,
that the
so-
government can do a better job results-wise?
because the countries that have the government involved more in society will have better outcomes broadly. Whereas the US, which still has this libertarian idea of let's just get private industry involved to deal with this problem, they're not dealing with the problems as well as countries that just say, oh, the government will do that.
Okay, yeah. So you're saying the more socialistic the country, the better outcomes.
Yeah, up to a certain point, of course.
Then why do so many people from so many countries want to come to the United States?
Because the United States gives you the opportunity to gamble and make it big, or you go back to your country and you live happily after. It has more opportunity for private capital because.
So the downside of your idea
economy.
is less upside.
No.
Yeah, you just said like you can make it big in the United States. So there's more of an there's more of an upside in the United States than Australia, right?
No. If you have 100 people and one out of those 100 people go to America and make it big and make all this cash and then they're suddenly vastly wealthy, then that doesn't mean that there's a bigger upside, because the 99 people lead good lives in their home country, or they don't make it good. They come back to their home country and they just keep kicking.
I'm talking about the
as good
individual
lives.
Those 100 individuals, is the upside is the upside higher than the upside, like the best case scenario? Is the upside higher in the United States or in Denmark?
Yeah, it's higher in the United States.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But why does that matter? If you've got a society of people, you don't just go, oh, we'll gear the society towards those few people that can overachieve.
Okay, what the good part of this upside is it drives people.
I don't think it does. Or if it does drive people, I don't think it drives all people in a good way.
What country is Google headquartered in?
Probably the US.
What country is Apple headquartered in?
It's probably the US.
What country is Microsoft headquartered in?
The United States.
What country is NVIDIA that just went sky high based in? United States. This upside that you're talking about drives innovation. It drives wealth. One of the wealthiest countries in the world is the United States. Now, so overall, one could say that the United States is better than the socialist countries. But I hear your point that there's going to be some people on the bottom who are going to be left out. So you've heard of Las Vegas, right? As an Australian?
Yeah.
This is interesting to me, and I want to ask you this question. Do you like to gamble?
No, I don't gamble at all.
Yeah, that explains why you like socialist countries. See, I like to gamble. Have you ever gambled?
Yeah, a couple of times.
Did you ever feel a rush, a dopamine hit?
Yeah, I did, but I
felt
pushed
good,
the
right?
rationality for it. Yeah.
Have you ever played poker?
But I pushed the rationality, and I lived most of my life as a rationalist.
Do you ever play poker?
Yeah, I have at the casinos in Melbourne.
Oh, speaking of which, poker's supposed to start right now. I'm 6 minutes late.
That's okay. You can beat me.
Do you want to come?
No. I've got my daughter. I've got to spend some time with her.
Well, you can play poker and take care of your daughter too.
No.
Okay. I was just going to say that this is the difference, I think, between me and people like yous. I'm okay with the fluctuations. I'm okay with, like, as you said, hitting it big or losing. To me, it makes life more enjoyable. The risk of losing and the hope of the huge reward. I'm a self-employed guy. My cash flow is very lumpy. You seem like the type of guy who, in your household, you want that steady paycheck. No?
No, I run a business.
Okay. So you're okay with lumpy cash flow? The inconsistent revenue stream?
I guess so.
Okay.
It's like I just broke my ankle for 6 weeks. So I've essentially had just revenue from employees for the last 6 weeks. And that's not a lot. I don't have a large business. But I've lost out on a massive chunk of my income for the last 6 weeks. but I'm perfectly fine because, I've got the social safety net.
Oh.
But now that my ankle's healed up, I'm going to be back out there making money, paying that massive tax bill that Australia hits me with every 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you should thank a very rich Australian for paying for you this week.
No. I've paid way too much tax the last
What?
couple of years.
Hang on now,
Getting
Bert.
back.
Careful. You paid way too much tax?
Yeah.
Can there be such a thing if the government's so effective?
Yes, there can be. And I paid way too much.
Hang on, Bert, you're in trouble now. Poker has to wait. You're in trouble now. If the government is more effective than the private sector at almost everything that you seem to say, how can one pay too much tax?
When the inflation or the economics of the country change, then the tax rate that's put upon certain people who are impacted the most by that inflationary change.
Yeah, but the government will take care of you. What are you worried about?
Paying too much tax.
I know, but
like inflation goes up, the tax rate stays steady, right?
What do you need money for?
To pay my mortgage, which has also vastly increased.
Well, can't the government pay that for you?
No, then they shouldn't.
What? They shouldn't pay your mortgage? Why not?
No, because we're in a mixed economy. The idea is that I pay into the tax system, and then this 6 weeks I have off. I don't have to worry about like massive medical bills from.
But wouldn't it be better if the government paid your mortgage?
No, of course not.
Why not?
Like, just broadly, with the economics of it all, it would increase inflation.
Yeah, but there's like when I say, isn't it better for the government to pay your mortgage? I'm not just saying that to you. I'm talking about everybody. Like, there's a lot of people who are homeless. Wouldn't it be better if the government paid for their house?
Yeah, of course. Potentially in the future, we'll get to that. But I'm not someone that wants a completely different system. I want that progressive change towards.
So you're still okay with a little bit of capitalism right now?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, good.
I mean, it makes sense. I've got no problem with people who go out and gamble and succeed and win big and make all this money by, going and starting a Silicon Valley enterprise. I don't think that you should gear your economy and your country towards those people. You should gear it towards the people that aren't going to be able to do that. And then you can leave gaps, you can leave market gaps, you can leave the capitalist system in place in most of it so that the rich can get rich. But
see, we're not that different.
Aren't exceedingly poor.
Bert, we're not that different then, because basically you're for a dual system like I am, but you're probably leaning 80% government socialism type programs and 20% capitalism, and I'm 80% the other way. That's all.
It's a pretty big difference.
I just think my ways. I think history has shown that leads to an overall net benefit, i.e., the United States, innovation, wealth, and your way can work like in places
leads to less poverty.
Yeah, I agree. It leads to less poverty, but I think the private sector can pull up the slack there. And countries like Canada and Australia, they're more socialistic, but I think history has shown that if you go any further on that socialistic scale, the countries tend to not work out so well.
Yeah, I don't know about that. There's a great book, you've probably read it. It's Rutger Bregman's Utopia for Realists.
Yeah.
And it sort of goes along the same line as this Steven Pinker stuff that goes into this, where essentially you can keep pushing things more and more socialist, and if you end up with any bad things, then you just take it back a step. But I think
the world should be doing that is impossible.
Of course it's not.
Government programs is like heroin. Once you start giving people the taste, they cry bloody murder if you take it away from them.
And that doesn't mean you can't take it away from it. It just means people might get upset if you do.
Oh, yes. Yeah. This is happening right now in the United States with the debt ceiling crisis or whatever. I haven't checked today where it's at, but it's like, oh, if you nasty conservatives, if you want to cut spending, I mean, you're of the devil. There's children hungry, don't you know? I mean, you try to make the budget lower than the year prior, not just the rate of growth, but actually decrease it. I don't think it's been done in the last 50 years. It hasn't.
Well, I bet if conservatives did it by reducing, say, the amount of money given to the armed forces or the Pentagon, then they probably get praise from both sides. But they seem to want to do it by cutting programs that gear towards people.
You're right there. Like it has conservatives or the Republicans, I should say. They're big spenders too, but yeah, I think once you've sucked from the government teat, it's really hard. People will revolt. They'll pick up bricks and throw it at windows if you threaten to take away the money that they haven't had to work for.
Yeah, there's probably a threshold for that, like most things. Like if it comes to the point where you have to go to your government-sponsored grocery store with your government-sponsored food stamps and buy your government-sponsored food, and that's the only way you can get food, then people would start their own capitalist systems outside of that. People would trade independently without the government involved.
You broke your ankle, you said?
Yeah.
And you said that you're getting paid right now for not working?
No, I have the childcare fee is wiped. There's a couple other little things like healthcare. I paid $90 for a set of crutches and a moon boot, and those have been my only expenses. But
you said earlier that you've paid a lot of tax.
Yep.
And that this tax now is coming back at you in the form of these
Yeah.
So here's my question to you. Wouldn't it be better to pay less tax and just take the money you would have paid in tax, put it in a savings account, and then when problems like this arise, you just use your own cash?
No, I would have used it to take money off my mortgage.
No, what I'm saying is have a rainy day fund. Wouldn't it be better to have that?
I do.
You do?
But I'd rather not dip into my rainy day fund for things like childcare and healthcare and instead just pay more taxes, because that also benefits people that don't have rainy day funds.
Okay, but I'm saying for you personally, wouldn't it be better not to pay the high tax and just have a bigger rainy day fund so when things like this happen, you pay for it yourself? For you?
No, because then there's all these people out there that are incredibly poor that don't have the rainy day fund.
I'm not right now. I'm not talking about the other people. I'm talking about you. Isn't it better for you?
No, Doug, you can't isolate a person within a system. It doesn't work like that.
No,
I could say yes, it would be better.
It doesn't even have to be the government.
If we were in a perfect system and there wasn't all these other considerations, like every single hypothetical you've thrown at me, all these other hypotheticals all have to do with isolating yourself completely from.
You don't even have to view it as the government. My question applies to even like any type of insurance. So let's say you bought a microwave and they ask you if you want to insure it for warranty purposes or whatever, and you have two options. You can pay them like I don't know, an extra $150 for the insurance, knowing that there's like a 1 in 3 chance it's going to break and you use it, or you can take $100 of your own money, stash it away. If the microwave breaks, I can pay for it. But you got to realize that every time you buy insurance, you're paying the insurance guy a cut.
Mm-hmm.
Why pay the insurance guy a cut when you can just self-insure?
So I do that for a microwave. I wouldn't do it for my car.
Why is that?
Because if I hit someone else with my car, I then have to dip in not just the cost of my vehicle or the repairs of my vehicle.
Okay, because it's too much money is what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, I got you.
It just makes no financial sense.
But let's say you could do it though if you had more money. You could self-insure for even hitting somebody with your car.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, sure. Yeah. But it makes less sense to do that than just buy insurance for your car.
No, I'm saying it makes more sense if you have the money. If like with the microwave, you admitted you do. But with a car, I admit, yeah, if someone sues you for $5 million and you don't have $5 million and you lose the court case, yeah, you're in trouble. But let's say you do have the $5 million. Let's say you've set aside $10 million for your vehicles and for potential lawyers' fees and all that. I mean, isn't it better that you take care of that yourself than go through a middleman?
Well, no, I don't think it would, because I'd end up paying out more than I'd pay in insurance.
I'm saying that you would end up paying out less because you're not paying a middleman.
No, you'd pay out more because you're paying in X% in the potential that you're paying out some massive amount at the end.
Right, but
Whereas pay by yourself, then you
don't
you're
understand
doing that massive amount.
Do you understand that insurance companies do what they do for profit?
Yeah, of course.
Right. And
The government doesn't, though.
But it's the same principle. The government employees get paid. The insurance employees get paid. If you can bypass them, you don't pay them. So if you can self-insure, you save money. Now, the reason why people don't self-insure is because they don't have the money to self-insure. But if you could do
save
it,
money.
it would be the better way to go. You would not
save
pay out
money
more.
until you have that car accident.
Bert,
or like with my ankle, I'd save money. Like if I just paid for all my medical bills by myself, the government didn't do it. I'd save money up until I broke my ankle and had like tens of thousands of dollars worth of
I'm from
healthcare.
Canada, which is very similar to Australia.
Mm-hmm.
I now live in the United States for the last 26 years. I have crunched these numbers on more than one occasion. I and my family are better off living in the United States of America with no universal health care than I would be if I lived in Canada. I've crunched these numbers over and over and over again. I've had knee surgery. My wife's had a hysterectomy. We've had 2 C-sections. I am saying this given all those surgeries, all those health conditions, I am still up. Why am I up in money? Because my tax rate, if I lived in Canada, would exceed 50%. Here in the United States, my tax rate is far lower. It is way better to self-insure. Like I have catastrophic insurance. Basically, I pay for the first $50,000 a year. Anything that happens to my family. But if something costs $5 million, then I'm insured. But basically, you will, and my premiums are very low. I pay $398 a month health insurance premiums. Take that times 12. That's nothing compared to the extra incremental taxes I would have to pay in Canada. For me personally, I save so much money by living in the United States under the private healthcare system. I have a wonderful hospital just 6 miles down the road. It's never busy, top quality service. I went into emergency the other day. I was in and out in under an hour. I waited for maybe 3 minutes. There was nobody in the waiting room. I got treated by 3 doctors. I had 6 tests done, CT scan, an MRI. I had EKG. I thought I was having a heart attack or something like that. I mean, I had all the tests done. I had the results back within 45 minutes. I had the best service, some of the top quality health service that anybody in the world could ask for. I paid of my own money. I finally got the bill. It was $1,500. It was, in my opinion, dirt cheap because my insurance company that I paid the $398 premium negotiates on my behalf. I pay them the premium. They negotiate. The original bill was probably $50,000, but that's meaningless. What I actually paid out of pocket was very little. I mean, it is far better to self-insure, save cash, pay for your own stuff than run it through the government.
I don't think so, because then you have a society that's less capable of dealing with these problems.
And I'm saying we need to encourage society to save money instead of spend it, to have 2 parent homes instead of 1.
That's the conservative problem. You think you can completely change human nature instead of just adapting society.
You can.
It hasn't ever happened.
You admit you can change human nature. You just think the government has to do it. I say the private sector. I say the government can do it, but I'm saying the private sector can do it even better. You're saying no, the private sector can't do it at all. It has to be the government.
No, the private sector could do it. I just don't think it would be the best possible choice.
Yeah,
I think you could
we can
more
agree to
likely,
disagree.
more reliably, more probabilistically get the government to fix a problem than an NGO.
Okay, we'll agree to disagree. Have a great day. Hope your ankle gets better.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Love you.
Love you. Don't say you love me. Come on, that's cheating. Oh, my poker. Poker pals are gonna be mad. I don't understand how people can think that going through a middleman, unless there's huge economies of scale, but in general, all else being equal, going direct, going wholesale, cutting out the middleman will, in the long run, in the short run, save you money. And the government is a middleman. Now, if your argument is, yes, it costs more money to go through the government, but it's better results, then that's a different argument. And then highly contested, too. Government is necessary. Of course it's necessary. That's, well, the difference between Bert and me is he's 80% socialism, 20% capitalism, roughly. And I'm 80% capitalism, 20% socialism, roughly. That's the difference between us. We differ in degree. If you never need insurance, self-insurance saves money. I'm saying I've had to go to the hospital. And I'm telling you that if you can learn to save cash, if you can learn to put $10, $20, $30, $40,000 in a bank and have the self-discipline to not touch it and say, this is for when something bad happens to our health, you will be far ahead if you can do it on your own. You're welcome. Poof. Flag waving phony socialists.